The guy greeted his subscribers and began setting up the camera for the upcoming shoot. He invited viewers to the Raid channel, where they could participate in raids of all kinds, since he himself was a YouTuber hunter from the Kangdo Chol class. The guy said that today's monster is a C+ class monster, and this video will be about an attack on an arachne. The audience was told that arachnes live in large groups, similar to ants, and are also classified as arthropods. However, these monsters are completely different from terrestrial spiders because they do not attack at night, but instead spit out their web. Before he could finish his sentence, the spiders began to scream, and the guy noticed that they were not spitting out threads, but shooting them at enemies. The spiders' legs began to glow with a bright green flame, and their faces took on a more stern and menacing expression. When the spider attacked Do Chul, he stopped the attack with his sword and said that everything was not going according to plan, asking his friend to cut out the scene later. Next to him was his friend who was in charge of filming and editing, and this guy's name was Meng Shi Wu. Arachnid's original fighting style revolved around indirect attacks and stealth hunting rather than a frontal assault. For this reason, they first spit out a sticky web. To completely immobilize the enemy and deprive them of the ability to resist, they then inject a deadly poison into the paralyzed target, causing it to slowly die, so direct attacks are uncommon for them. At some point, Do Chul noticed something strange. The veins on his face began to appear more and more prominently. He shouted at Meng Shi Wu, promising to talk to him later, and rushed furiously to attack the huge spider. He swung his sword masterfully, cutting off the monster's paws, from which poisonous green slime immediately flowed. Another spider appeared in front of him, screaming loudly, but the guy was not afraid and resolutely rushed towards it. With one powerful and precise blow, he cut the spider in half, dispatching it instantly and without hesitation. Do Chul found himself standing on a whole mountain of corpses of defeated monsters and breathing heavily from fatigue. He asked his friend why the arachnes attacked so strangely, since he said that they first used webs. Then he wondered if these monsters were already in a desperate situation and had nothing more to lose. An enraged Do Chul grabbed Shi Wu by the shirt and demanded to know why he continued to act innocent. Even after Do Chul apologized, it didn't stop him, and he punched the guy in the stomach, not realizing what was changing and making him angry. As Shi Wu lay on the floor trying to catch his breath, Do Chul ordered him to gather information about the monsters much better. He added that Shi Wu had no special traits and that he was completely useless to the team in battle. Shi Wu thought about his own characteristics. After all, he was an awakened one, but his ability was completely insignificant. His skill turned out to be absolutely useless for the work of hunters, since he really did not possess anything. To survive, Shi Wu chose a different path for himself, carefully analyzing monsters and studying their habits. He showed the hunters the location of enemies, told them about their weaknesses, and taught them how to properly plan attacks. Do Chul continued to insult Shi Wu, saying that because of his mistakes, he almost died and his friends could have lost their lives. But at that moment, the comrades sitting next to him suddenly began to tremble and point their fingers somewhere behind his back. Do Chul was perplexed, looking at his friends, but at that moment, a huge, terrifying spider towered behind him. When everyone in the cave realized that an elite monster had appeared, they immediately rushed towards the exit. A huge spider was racing after them, and on top of its back was sewn the body of a man with his head turned back. Do Chul ran, holding his armor and sword in his hands, and thought that he could die if he didn't find bait quickly. He looked at Shi Wu and decided that he should be the one to become the bait victim for the huge spider. When the guy almost reached him, Do Chul kicked him right in the face with all his might. The blow caused Shi Wu to lose his balance, become temporarily blind, and scream in intense pain. Do Chul said that all of this happened because of Shi Wu's bad information, and he should take responsibility. Shi Wu lay on the floor, breathing heavily, and not knowing if he would even have time to get to his feet. Suddenly, right behind him, a huge, terrifying monster rose up, ready to attack. His body was shaking and his muscles were completely unresponsive, leaving him helpless. The spider screamed and began to spit out saliva, and Shi Wu wondered if this was how he would die. Memories took him back to the past, where he stood at a woman's bedside in the hospital. He looked at her tenderly and called her his mother. Then she extended her hand to him and said that he must always protect his sister. At that moment, he came to his senses and realized that he could not die here because for the sake of his younger sister, he was obliged to live. He grabbed the sword that his comrade had dropped earlier in the heat of battle. Gathering all his resolve, he turned towards the enemy, thinking only that he had to survive. With a furious cry, he swung his sword, preparing to deliver the killing blow. After his blow, one of the monster's limbs flew to the side, and suddenly a fire appeared that he did not expect. When he looked to the side, he saw a blonde guy in a hood next to him. The stranger was wearing a red cloak and had a strong build, and Shi Wu wondered who he was. Suddenly, a powerful purple explosion was heard in the cave, illuminating the entire space. Shi Wu and the mysterious guy immediately turned towards the source of the sound. There stood a man with white hair and sharp teeth, and in his hand, a purple fire was sparkling. He jumped down and flew towards the stranger, calling him arrogant and promising that he would not escape here again. The blonde didn't wait. He screamed, and a bright red fire appeared in his hands, after which he rushed into battle. As their attacks collided, Shi Wu watched and didn't understand why the two were fighting. The fusion of their powers caused a huge explosion that shook everything around. Shi Wu couldn't comprehend what was happening, but he understood that their incredible power was capable of instilling fear even in the Arachnes. He realized that these two were creatures that even elite monsters trembled before. New explosions, flashes of bright rays, and loud bangs were heard in the cave. Shi Wu covered his face with his hands to keep the dust out of his eyes and wondered who they were. At that moment, the white-haired guy kicked his opponent in the stomach. A beam of fire fell from above onto the ground and exploded with a roar. The guy with purple magic shouted at the enemy to stop hiding and stop his antics. The blonde replied that their confrontation would be long until everything was finally over. He immediately put his hand forward and began to conjure a huge sphere of fire. The enemy was shocked that he was ready to go to the end, but was not going to refuse the fight. He fired a stream of purple magic towards him, and their powers clashed. As soon as the two beams touched, an incredibly bright light appeared. The white-haired guy stated that at this rate, the stranger wouldn't leave here unharmed either. The blonde replied that he didn't care, and continued to smile, even in mortal combat. He turned to Shi Wu and said that it only happened because he left the possibility open. Afterwards, he apologized to Shi Wu for dragging him into such events. Their two beams began to mix, turning into one huge destructive sphere. Then there was a deafening explosion, the light of which illuminated the entire cave. The last thing the blonde said was that he was leaving all his affairs to Shi Wu. After a while, everything stopped and the dust cloud gradually dissipated. Shi Wu peered into the cave, trying to figure out what had just happened. He started looking around and couldn't comprehend what had happened. Suddenly, he felt that his foot was standing right on the phone. He picked up the device and didn't understand why there was a smartphone there. A message appeared on the screen asking for confirmation of the new manager. The guy didn't understand anything because the phone was already showing a connection check. Immediately after this, a notification appeared about the change in the manager's position and its successful completion. A blue light emanated from the phone, and the spirits of warriors began to appear in the air. A greeting appeared on the screen, and it turned out that he was now at GodTube and had become the new manager. When the boys ran out of the cave into the street, the sun was already shining brightly, and the air was filled with freshness. They all fell to the ground, breathing heavily and trying to catch their breath after the grueling fight. Dochul couldn't believe he was so unlucky that he met an elite monster in a plus dungeon. His comrades claimed that it was thanks to him that they all survived, because he used the operators as bait, and this saved their lives. Dochul said that it was not for nothing that his channel's motto was, "We will raid everything we can," because he was prepared for such situations. Suddenly, Shi Wu ran out of the cave, his eyes burning with anger, directed straight at Dochul. Dochul turned around in surprise, not believing that Shi Wu was still alive and standing in front of him. When a fist flew towards him, he managed to stop the attack with his elbow, and then he himself struck at Shi Wu, asking if he had forgotten that his rank was only F. Dochul said he didn't know how Shi Wu got out, but admitted he was very lucky. He would have been too lazy to look for a new editor, so an evil smile appeared on his face. Shi Wu couldn't believe that Dochul seriously thought he would continue working for the man who tried to kill him. Dochul pressed the point, reminding him that it was Shi Wu who begged him for help and cried while talking about money for medicine for his sister. He said that he helped him out of generosity, and now Shi Wu is obliged to repay him and has no right to do this. Shi Wu responded that he had formed habits due to Dochul's pressure, and that he might post a video of himself being dumped, asking if Dochul could imagine how many views the video would get if it were posted online. Dochul only laughed ominously, saying that Shi Wu knew perfectly well that he could kill him right here. Shi Wu understood this, but said that then Dochul would go to jail and lose the channel he had created with such hard work. Dochol's eyes began to glow red, and he threatened that if the video was released, Shi Wu's sister would not be safe. Dochol turned to his comrades and ordered them to find a new editor, and then told them to grab their things and get out of there. Shi Wu said as he left that he should just try to harm his sister, and then he would understand what they would do to him. Sitting at home at the table, Shi Wu was scrolling through his new phone and looking at a site called GodTub. He didn't understand whether these were really channels of gods and not ordinary people behind them. YouTube turned out to be a free platform where anyone could upload their videos, and the most popular channels were those of hunters. A girl with the nickname Saint said that she bought a sword from Hephaestus and was going to test it on Lucifer. The guy with the nickname Thor fought with the World family, and for him it was a trifle, because he defeated the boss in 12 minutes. Shi Wu recalled the gods of mythology, historical heroes, and legendary figures, comparing them with the owners of these channels. He wondered if they were the ones who were in charge of all this and behind the channels. Shi Wu remembered the blonde man he met earlier and tried to understand why he gave him a phone. He put the gadget on the table and thought about how confusing and difficult it all was to understand. If this is true and the channels are indeed controlled by the gods on YouTube, then this changes a lot. It's incredible, but these channels always have at least 1 million subscribers from the very beginning. The guy decided that it didn't look so bad, and he should try it himself. A table appeared on the phone, inviting people to participate and study a lecture on the traits of insight. Afterwards, he was informed that he had subscribed to Zhuge Liang's channel, one of the 3 known channels, and now he suddenly gained S+ rank insight. Shi Wu was shocked because S+ only existed as a classification, not a real rank. The people who fought against the Demon Lord were once the 13 heroes, and they were assumed to have S+ traits. He couldn't believe that he could get something like this just by subscribing to the channel. If this was really true, he should have felt a change. But looking at his hand, he felt nothing. Perhaps this improves observation and intelligence, and then the difference will be difficult to notice immediately. The Hercules channel announced an event for 10,000 subscribers, a free personal training session on lifting the House of Zeus. Shi Wu subscribed to this channel as well, deciding to see if he could notice the difference. The table showed that he had subscribed to Hercules' channel, the second of 3, and had received superhuman strength of the ES rank. Shi Wu was shocked and couldn't believe that this was real, and he slammed his fist on the table. Having miscalculated his strength, he smashed the technique into small pieces and realized that he had indeed received the SS trait. The table confirmed that he was using superhuman strength, and his mastery of its use had increased by 0.1%. Shi Wu couldn't believe that he had obtained such a high-ranking trait just by signing up. He looked at the phone for a long time, then grabbed his head, realizing that he had absolutely no idea what this GodTub was. The table informed him that his S+ insight skill had increased thanks to his reflections and was now 0.1%. Shi Wu wondered if he needed to reach 100% to fully master this ability, and thought about Heracles' training. He watched the preview of the video and clicked on it to unpause it and see the rest. People in Greek clothes watched in amazement what was happening on the screen. Hercules tore out one of the building's columns and began squatting with it as if with dumbbells. His muscles were tensing and growing. He was talking about an amazing feeling and felt stimulation in his legs. Then he stood up without dropping the column. Sparks of his power flashed around him, and he shouted that it was incredible. Shi Wu looked at everything that was happening in amazement, completely unable to understand its meaning. He realized that it was now clear why he only had 1 follower, and decided to unsubscribe as well. But suddenly the table notified him that unsubscribing was impossible. Hercules pointed his finger at the thin boy, as if he were Shi Wu, and said that he could come, but he could not leave whenever he wanted. Shi Wu tried to unsubscribe several times, but each time a message appeared that it was impossible. The guy was angry because he couldn't unsubscribe, and Hercules said that he would wait for him tomorrow. Suddenly, his thoughts were interrupted by a call from Dochol. Shi Wu was surprised and didn't understand why he suddenly called him. He picked up the phone and coldly asked what he needed, surprising Dochol, who thought he had been blocked. Shi Wu interrupted him and asked him directly what he wanted, but he asked a counter question. Dochol wondered if Shi Wu really had nowhere else to go. Shi Wu was annoyed and thought Dochol was calling to tease him, but he said he wanted to discuss business. He asked Shi Wu not to be so rude, since they had only worked together recently. Shi Wu shouted, demanding that he tell him directly what he wanted, as he didn't have time. Dochul explained that the group SH invited them to stream together and asked if he wanted to join. When Shi Wu heard this name, he was truly shocked. SH is the #1 leading financial company in Korea. Recently, the group leader's granddaughter awakened 2 hunter traits within herself. Shi Wu suggested that the company was now also involved in monster hunting. Dochul said they are expanding their business and want to try new directions. Shi Wu noted that this was the same SH group and asked Dochul's opinion, but he firmly refused. Dochul was amazed and said that he would pay him 50,000 for each video. He asked if Shi Wu wanted to join right now. Shi Wu smiled and replied that he still refused. Dochul couldn't understand the reason, since it was 10 times more than the usual payment, and asked how much he wanted. Shi Wu calmly said that he needed 50 million. Dochul was shocked and wondered if he had gone crazy to demand such a sum. The table again showed that the skill of insight, ES+, increased and amounted to 0.2%. Shi Wu said he would try to guess why the SH group approached Dochul instead of the high-ranking hunters. Dochul became noticeably nervous and asked what he would say. Shi Wu said that it was obvious. The headmaster's granddaughter had just obtained 2 E-rank traits, and Han Tae-sung wanted her to learn the basics. And the main basis for hunters is hunting monsters. And it is for this reason that Dokolia's channel has gained 210,000 subscribers. Shi Wu emphasized that Dochul only made money thanks to his unique strategies. He said that in fact, Representative Han Tae-sung approached Dochul precisely because of Shi Wu's knowledge. Dochul started stuttering and said that 50 million was too much. Shi Wu asked if he didn't want to take it back. Dochul couldn't answer anything and his teeth were grinding with anger. Shi Wu hung up and threw the phone on the table. He said that if Dochul couldn't get a loan or credit, he should look for someone else. And so together, Shi Wu and Dochul with their team find themselves in a dungeon of a certain rank. Shi Wu asks his comrade when he plans to transfer the rest of the money.
도철은 이미 그가 이전에 이송을 언급했다고 말한다.
Suddenly they hear a strange sound, and one of them turns around sharply, trying to figure out the source. A girl stands before them, introducing herself as Han Cherin, and declares that she will join the raid right now. Shi Wu looks at her and doubts that this is the real Han Cherin, but notes her beauty. He understands that it will not be easy to approach such a girl and win her favor. As long as Shi Wu gets paid, he decides to just do his job without asking any questions. And so they reach their destination, where a huge, hairy monster stands in front of them, standing with its back to them. Cherin notices that it is a black troll, and Dochul happily confirms her guess. He begins to talk about the monster's classification, its rank, and who it belongs to. Dochul explains that the strategy against the troll is to completely rip apart the body. To win, you need to destroy the heart and cut off the head before regeneration begins. Cherin doesn't listen to his explanation and suddenly takes out Dochul's sword from his bosom. She then charges towards the monster with determination, ready to fight without hesitation. She flies up to his back and swings her sword to strike. When the troll turns around, she plunges the blade straight into his heart. After this, she pulls out her weapon and in one motion cuts off the monster's head, landing on the ground. Shi Wu and Dochul stand there, confused and amazed, watching her, and the girl says that it was easy. Dochul admits that he didn't expect such a flawless victory and calls her a worthy S-rank hunter. Cherin waves her sword, shaking off the blood, and replies that the guy is just flattering her. Shi Wu, who had been silent the entire time, notices that the girl has an unusual sword. He assumes that this is Aurelian's legendary weapon and inquires about its price. Cherin looks at the blade and calmly says that it is worth about 20 billion.
도철은 그런 말에 놀랐지만 시우는 그 말을 듣고 기뻐했다.
The girl points forward and says that they shouldn't limit themselves to just one troll. An hour later, they go deeper into the cave and continue their journey. There's another pool of blood at Cherin's feet, and she says she's slowly figured it out. They assume that the trolls are gone and think that the raid can be completed. Dochul bows before the girl, takes her hand, and thanks her for the work she has done. In his mind, he realizes that he missed the chance to make connections in the guild and will lose 50 million because of Shi Wu. Shi Wu notices his mood and thinks that this is what he should be worried about, not something else. Suddenly they hear strange sounds and everyone becomes wary. Dochul assumes that the enemy is not an elite monster based on its size. Shi Wu agrees that it is not an elite monster, but his whole body trembles with fear. A huge creature with horns, tumors, and a single powerful limb appears before them. This is a boss monster with glowing eyes, ready to kill anyone who comes near. The monster swings its paw and lets out a loud cry. Charon reacts instantly and stops his sword strike. Dochul hides behind her back and is amazed by her strength and courage. The rest of the comrades start screaming and rush towards the exit of the cave. The monster uses its power, throws Charon aside, and takes a huge stone. He breaks a boulder with his palm and throws dozens of fragments towards the running people. The rocks stop them, and even Dochul miraculously dodges, saving her life. He thinks only about escape, not caring about the team, because he wants to survive. Breathing heavily, he runs and realizes that he should not die in this place. His thoughts of salvation are interrupted by the appearance of a monster blocking his path. The monster turns out to be so huge that its leg is equal to the guy's height. Dochul was frozen with horror, unable to move, realizing that death was near. Suddenly, Charon returns and stops the giant hand's blow, but this time she can't take it anymore and flies off, crashing into the wall with a cry of pain. A monster appears in front of her and raises his fist for the finishing blow. The girl clearly understands that she doesn't have time to dodge, but she must try. Gathering her last strength, she jumps back and finds herself near the monster's head. Charon uses magic and delivers several blows to his neck. The monster's eyes flash brightly, as if it were looking straight at her. The monster raises its bony hand and tries to bring it down on the girl. Charon reacts in time, jumps back, and falls to the floor. The monster's hand still flies towards her, and she, trembling, holds it back with her sword. Shi Wu watches in shock and realizes that they cannot win. He thinks that even with Han Charon, an S-rank hunter, they have no chance without experience. The monster slams its hand into the ground, and the cave shakes with an explosion. Shi Wu looks at his evil eyes and realizes that victory is impossible. The only choice he sees is to leave Charon and run away. Otherwise, he too will die in this deadly place. The guy was thinking about the possibility of believing in an SS rank superpower on GodTube, but none of them knew exactly his current rank. Suddenly, Dochul rushed past Shi Wu, shouting something loudly and completely ignoring the others. Shi Wu turned around with obvious surprise and looked after him for a long time, not understanding what was happening. He remembered how Dochul had previously yelled at him and blamed him for everything because of the false information that Shi Wu had allegedly spread. Dochul not only shouted, but also accused the guy of taking full responsibility for what happened. At that moment, Shi Wu lay helplessly on the floor, was very scared, and almost lost consciousness from fear and pain. Meanwhile, Charon continued to hold off the monster's attack with her sword, although her strength was at its limit. Shi Wu, standing nearby, thought only that they had no chance of winning, and saw escape as the only way out. Numerous words and thoughts swarmed in his head, but they all boiled down to one thing: run without looking back. In the end, he made his choice, deciding that he had to flee or die right there on the spot. But suddenly he stopped and shouted loudly, calling on everyone to come to him immediately. He thought that money or prestige meant absolutely nothing when a person was on the verge of death. However, if he were to abandon Han Charin here and run away now, he would become a terrible person. And then he realized that he would be no different from Dochul. So he screamed and raised his clenched fist. After that, he activated his power, and his hand collided with the hand of a huge monster. The monster was surprised and did not understand at all what was happening at that moment. Charon was surprised to see that the boy had managed to cut off the monster's arm with one movement. She looked at her comrade and did not understand who he really was and where such strength came from. As Shi Wu walked through the dark cave, the figure of Hercules suddenly appeared behind him. The guy stopped in the middle of the road and began to breathe heavily, feeling a surge of fatigue and tension. Then he looked at his own hand, his eyes lit up, and he felt a power flare up inside him. The huge monster stood motionless, its palm stuck in the stone roof of the cave. But after just a few seconds, he managed to free his hand, and his clenched fist flew forward. This blow landed directly on Shi Wu's body, who, gathering all his strength, tried to stop it. The monster pressed harder and harder on him, but the boy was adamant and continued to stand motionless. Shi Wu held on for a little while longer, and at that moment loudly gave a command to his partner. She raised her sword, rose into the air, and rushed headlong towards the monster. He didn't even have time to react, and Charon landed on him, plunging the sword straight into his heart. Then she pushed off, flew through the air, did a few somersaults, and landed at the monster's head. As soon as the monster began to react, Charon had already raised her sword, preparing for the decisive blow. Gathering the rest of her strength, she cut the monster's head from the neck down with one precise movement. After that, she sank to the ground and stood next to the heavily breathing Shi Wu. The boy looked at the defeated monster with disbelief, not believing that everything was really over. But he knew that the situation looked strange, and something was definitely wrong here. After all, bosses are special monsters capable of double transformations, and physical mutation is natural for them. And suddenly the monster's head rose into the air. Black liquid flowed out of it, and the head itself let out a laugh. At that moment, the monster's body extended its palm and abruptly grabbed the girl. After that, it squeezed her limbs with terrible force, and Shi Wu decided that it was all over. He understood that he was unable to do anything, because even the powers he had received were now too weak. Then he decided to at least buy a little time, and began to unclench the monster's palm with all his might. Half-dead Charon whispered to him to run away from here quickly while there was still a chance. But the guy remained adamant, continuing to fight and ordering the girl to aim for the heart. With incredible effort, she broke free from the grip and fell to the ground, almost exhausted. She raised the sword in her hands and confidently said that now everything was perfectly clear. Meanwhile, the monster's head had grown back onto its body, and the girl quickly rushed towards the monster. Shi Wu held the monster's hand and told Charon to trust him completely and attack. Although the monster did not understand their words, he began to suspect something was wrong and began to twitch restlessly. He tried to free his hand, but a girl with a sword was already rushing towards him. Running to cover the distance, she climbed onto his arm and cut through the muscles along with the skin. After that, she found herself at the monster's chest and forcefully thrust the sword straight into the heart. Shi Wu knew that he couldn't hold out for more than half a second. There was no time to explain. That's why he shouted that the monster had two hearts hidden at once, and that he needed to look for the second one. He was sure that the girl with her sixth sense would be able to guess where it was located, but the monster continued to attack, and Charon was thrown back by the force of the blow. Shi Wu believed that she would definitely figure out where exactly the monster's second heart was, and then the girl accelerated again, jumped up and thrust the sword into the other side of the chest. Shi Wu used magic, jumped up and loudly declared that the monster had to stop. He said that the monster must accept its death and no longer resist. The system noted that his skill had increased slightly, and this gave him strength. The last thing the ogre saw was the face of an enraged boy rushing towards him. Using the power of magic, Shi Wu delivered an incredible blow directly at the monster's head. Charon covered her face with her hand to keep the dust out of her eyes, and thought with relief that they had finally won. But then her attention was drawn to how abruptly her partner's behavior had changed, because now he was standing in front of her, covered in blood. After that, he walked a few steps forward and fell right on the ground in front of the girl, and she wondered who he really was. After a while, Shi Wu opened his eyes and realized that he was now in a hospital room. Charon was sitting in front of him, and the girl was regretfully apologizing to the guy. Shi Wu, as soon as he noticed her, was immediately frightened and surprised at the same time. A little embarrassed, he asked what she was doing here next to him. Charon pointed to the IV and said that she brought him to the hospital because he was badly injured, with torn muscles and broken ribs. She sat on his bed and, moving closer, asked how he was feeling. Shi Wu realized that the girl was too close, and because of this, he began to feel very embarrassed. After that, Charon placed her palm on his forehead, checking his condition. They sat, looked at each other for a while, and were silent. The girl then said that she felt like Shi Wu had a fever. After that, she pulled back and remembered that they hadn't even properly introduced themselves. So she asked his name. Shi Wu told him his name, but he didn't understand whether the girl didn't know it, since she should have found out his personal information upon hospitalization. Charon, as if reading his thoughts, replied that she wanted to hear it directly from him. Shi Wu was surprised and wondered if she could really read his mind, since her unique trait as an S-class person was her sixth sense. The girl said that Shi Wu must still be groggy after waking up, but she still wanted to make him one proposal. Shi Wu was extremely surprised when he heard her words. The girl didn't waste any time and asked if he wanted to join her team. Shi Wu liked the proposal and asked if all this was just because he had fought the ogre. Charon interrupted him and asked what he thought about a 1 billion won annual salary. She added that they would also split any spoils from the monsters in half, and Shi Wu decided that this was madness. The girl said that she heard about his younger sister Soa's blood disease and added that she would pay for her treatment. Shi Wu was glad to hear this, but suspicions still remained in his mind. The guy asked what he had done to deserve such a high price. Charon also asked him to develop one strategy. This strategy would work for all the monsters she planned to hunt in the future. Closer to the night, left alone, The guy wondered whether it was worth refusing her offer. After all, earlier, when talking to the girl, he directly said that he refused. Sharon then replied that she understood everything, but asked him to let her know if he changed his mind. She said that she still owed him for saving his life, so she would repay the debt by paying for his sister's treatment. Shi Wu decided to test the possibility of using the GodTube channel, as it turns S-class hunters into mere extras. You shouldn't miss such an opportunity, because you can immediately accept the offer, but your sister's illness still requires medicine. Long ago, his sister had fallen into a dungeon breach and was now suffering from a blood disease for which there was no cure. Modern medicine could only alleviate the symptoms, but with GodTube, everything could be changed. If Shi Wu obtains their traits, he will definitely be able to cure So-Ah. But the medicinal ingredients used for treatment were too expensive. Since the disease is rare, the guy will have to earn a lot of money. But in the meantime, he needed to finish editing the videos for 50 million won. Shi Wu spent a long time typing on his laptop and reviewing the footage. Suddenly, he stopped, because something caught his attention. He watched the moment where the girl was talking about the cost of her sword, and I wondered what would happen if I made my own equipment and sold it. He came to the conclusion that he could earn billions in the shortest possible time, but he only had one subscription left. If a guy wanted to get an extra subscription, he had to join the group, which cost 1 million. The only sure way to create a weapon is to study metallurgy. That's why Shi Wu subscribed to Hephaestus's channel. Once he did this, the tablet informed him that he had obtained the metallurgy of a god. The room became hot from steam, lava, and hot metal. The man counted 1, 2, 1, 2, and hit the weapon with a hammer. He shouted that many were afraid of failure in improving weapons, because people at that time did not have enough courage. He added that one must be prepared for the fact that the weapon could be destroyed, and Shi Wu watched and did not understand why the gods were behaving this way. The table wrote that he corrected his incorrect knowledge of metallurgy and significantly improved his level of proficiency in it. The next day, the weather was fine, and there was a playground near the hospital. When Shi Wu felt better, he went outside and started doing pull-ups on the horizontal bars. Doctors discussed how Shi Wu's patient's body had become much better looking. Shi Wu heard their words and didn't believe them until the girl said that the doctor called his recovery incredibly fast, even for a hunter. The doctor also said that he would be discharged tomorrow, and the guy was surprised because he thought he would have to train for a long time. At that moment, his superhuman strength mastery increased slightly. The guy decided that if he used super strength too often, his muscles would break down again, so it was better to train hard. He was suddenly interrupted as someone called him from behind, and the boy turned around. It turned out to be his sister So-Ah, who said she had heard about his imminent discharge. She said that she was very worried because her brother was admitted to the hospital in serious condition. She didn't understand why the doctors said he should stay in hospital for a month, but now they were discharging him in a week. Shi Wu thought his sister was stupid and thought she was disappointed that he was being discharged early. He smiled and said that she shouldn't worry about money because at least here she didn't have to think about it. The guy patted So-Ah on the head, and the girl said that she knew that Chetanuni was paying for all the treatment. Shi Wu was very surprised to hear this addressed to his sister. So-Ah explained that the girl herself asked to be called that because she doesn't have any sisters, and So-Ah looks very much like the younger one. Shi Wu was amazed and asked his sister if they had ever met before. So-Ah cheerfully replied that yes, Charon sometimes came to visit, although he himself had never seen her. The girl explained that Charon visited her while her brother was training, and asked if everything was okay with him. The guy thought, because Charon was very busy as a hunter, but still found time, did she really still want to recruit him? So-Ah suggested that Charon was doing this because she liked her brother, since the nurses were always talking about him. Shi Wu sharply told his sister to forget about it, stop chatting nonsense and quickly go inside, because he needed to go somewhere. Now the guy was only determined to make money, and now Shi Wu is already in the dungeon, but he can't understand why he is scared. Is it because this is his first time hunting monsters himself? He clenches his fingers into a fist and then unclenches them, trying to calm himself down a little before the fight. After this, he hears strange sounds and immediately realizes that the monsters are already very close. He is now in the goblin lair in an EF rank dungeon and sees numerous small monsters running towards him. All of these creatures have different weapons. Some brandish stones while others hold knives. The spears fly straight towards the guy, but he manages to dodge in time. He understands and remembers that goblins always act in groups, but their numbers are still too great. The monsters keep growing in number, and they all keep running straight towards Shi Wu. One of the goblins tries to hit him with his mace, but the guy quickly crouches and deftly dodges. After this, he uses magic and delivers a blow that causes the goblin's body to split into two parts. Blood splashes in all directions and even hits Shi Wu's face. He is shocked that the monster literally exploded and wonders if its power was actually stronger than he imagined. Now the guy becomes extremely calm and slowly walks towards the remaining goblins. He stops briefly and begins to stretch his neck, and after that, with a slight smile, he tells the goblins to attack. After a few hours, Shi Wu defeats all the goblins and throws their bodies on the ground, asking the man how many he can make from them. The man is shocked and doesn't understand what exactly he wants, since he asked for ingredients, not body parts. It was the owner of the So-So family's forge, Palguan, and he invites the boy inside to teach him how to forge weapons. The blacksmith spent most of his youth studying metallurgy, and now, 20 years later, when he is already over 40, he tells Shi Wu that youth is not only about strength. He explains that just because a person has good materials doesn't mean he can easily create A or S rank equipment, because he is now an awakened and talented craftsman himself. Shi Wu was completely amazed and watched the work of the experienced blacksmith with great interest. The man handed him a hammer and said that he had shown him how to do it, and now it was the boy's turn. The blacksmith walked away, remembering the name of his guest, and noted that he had not asked to make equipment for him or to accept him as an apprentice. Shi Wu didn't even ask to join his guild in exchange for rent. He was the first one who only asked to borrow the workshop. The man allowed this more out of curiosity because he wanted to know what his intentions were, since people usually think that metallurgy is an easy skill, but it took him 20 years to reach his current level. Moreover, this brat was looking at his phone the whole time. He must have turned on a video on YouTube and thinks that everything is just as simple. The blacksmith understood that his guest was deeply mistaken, but soon he suddenly became very surprised. After some time, a girl, a representative of the Soyun company, named Kim Soyun, entered the forge. The blacksmith greets her, and the girl says that no one else would come to this forge, where it stinks of sweat. But the man reminds her that she could entrust this to someone else, and she comes every time. Soyun replies that she is dealing with the best blacksmith in all of Korea, and so of course she must come in person. The girl reminded that she is Kim So-yeon, a representative of a large company that works only with the best products. She puts down the bag and says that these are the ingredients that the blacksmith spoke about last time, and as for the price, the man interrupts, saying that the object is wrapped in cloth and the blade is sharp, so you should be careful. The girl again tries to talk about the price and equipment for the group, but she is distracted by a loud sound. She yells at Shi Wu and asks him to be quiet because she is trying to talk. Soyeon looks at several swords he made and doesn't understand what the guy is even doing. She takes one of these swords and still doesn't understand how it can be called a weapon. The blacksmith asks her opinion, and the girl replies that the blade is dull and the shape is rough, and how could anyone use it at all? The man then asks what she would say if she found out that they were made from the bones of goblins and kobolds. Soyeon was completely shocked when she heard this, and the blacksmith added that the material was in even worse condition. He explained that it was done by a man who had picked up a hammer for the first time that day, and the girl asked if he had really taken on a new apprentice. The man said he had thought about this idea, but the guy's type of work turned out to be too unusual. The work looked too incredible for someone who was holding a hammer for the first time. Shi Wu confidently hit the blade with a hammer and was not at all afraid of fire. Even when everything around him was melting and flames were covering him, he did not get distracted and continued. The blacksmith said that he had never seen anyone make weapons from such material before, but the boy still refused to become his apprentice. Seon was very interested and turned around to get a better look at this guest. Shi Wu was working tirelessly at this time, only occasionally pausing to wipe the sweat from his forehead. And now he had a spear of black metal in his hand, and his god metallurgy skill had increased significantly. Several tables appeared next to the guy, indicating the percentage by which his skill had increased. Shi Wu didn't believe that he was able to make equipment from trash, because he managed to create a weapon, but he didn't know how to sell it now. Suddenly, Soyun appeared behind him and asked if the guy was really thinking about selling the sword. She introduced herself as a representative of the Soyun company and extended her hand to him. Shi Wu had heard of Soyun before, as they specialize in the hunting business and consider trust and reliability to be their core values, making them quite well known in the industry. The girl said that their company only deals with the best products in Korea, and if the guy wanted to sell a gun, she would buy it. Soyun asked to see the weapon closer, and Shi Wu, hearing about the money, asked how much she was willing to pay for the blade. Shi Wu heard the price of 1 million won for one such weapon and immediately returned to work. After the deal was made, the guy started making weapons with unprecedented persistence, like a madman. Meanwhile, Soyun found rich clients and resold all the weapons he created. After some time, Soyun returned to the forge and screamed with joy. After all, her company has now officially signed a contract with the influential SH Group. She noted that the guy did an excellent job because everything from the quantity and delivery time to the quality of the equipment was impeccable. Otherwise, they would have had huge problems. She took Shi Wu's hands in hers and thanked him, saying that if he needed anything, he only had to say so, and she would get it for him. After that, she took out her phone and asked him to check the bill. Shi Wu took the phone and began to read it carefully, and a lot of numbers were glowing on the screen. 2,800 seemed less to him than he expected. Soyun was surprised to hear such words and asked him to check again. His balance was 2.8 million, and this made the guy very happy, because it was at that moment that he was finally reborn as a slave to money. Shi Wu sat, loaded down with weapons and heavy armor, and stared intently at the screen of his phone. He couldn't believe the numbers he saw on his balance sheet, and repeated them to himself over and over again to make sure. Now he realizes he can subscribe to a GodTube subscription, and to please himself, the guy looks at different channels with legendary doctors. Among them were Hua Tuo, Hippocrates, and Huo Zhang. And a subscription to all three channels cost 300 million won a month. But in his current situation, he could only choose one. For Shi Wu, this choice was really difficult, so he thought for a long time, trying to make the right decision. He finally decided to test his luck and clicked the subscribe button, making his choice almost blindly. He was scared and anxious from the unknown, because he didn't know who exactly he had signed up for. But he decided that it was better to do something than to do nothing. After some time, the blacksmith told him that nothing could be done, since fragile materials are very difficult to polish, so it is worth keeping the processing to a minimum. Although precision machining is possible, even with highly brittle materials, the process requires absolutely precise and meticulous work. Their conversation was suddenly interrupted by Soyun, and the blacksmith asked why she kept coming, but the girl replied that she came solely because of Shi Wu. Shi Wu, upon seeing the girl, immediately greeted her and admitted that he had been waiting for her, which made Soyun genuinely happy. He handed her a small piece of paper and reminded her that last time she said she could get everything he needed, and then asked if it was possible to get those things. Soyun happily accepted the paper and confidently said that of course she would get everything as he asked. The sheet of paper contained a list: mountain frankincense, silphium, saxifrage, century-old ginseng, century-old rune flower, and malnary. Shi Wu asked if it was really that hard to get all of this, but the girl calmly replied that it was possible, although it would be quite expensive. She clarified that such rare ingredients cost approximately 300 million won, but was willing to give the guy a 20 million won discount. All these things were needed by Shi Wu to improve his mastery of the divine medical art, which he obtained through his membership on GodTube, where he subscribed to Hua Tuo's channel. Improving his skill level on his own proved difficult, as these were rare medicinal herbs that he didn't know where to get, and he even doubted whether they were sold anywhere. If it weren't for Miss Soyun's help, the boy probably would never have been able to obtain such ingredients. Soyun saw his reaction and directly asked if she should buy all of this for him so that he could advance. Shi Wu had no choice but to agree, so he received 284 million won from the girl and immediately gave her 280 million, leaving himself only 4 million in the balance. The subscription was 100 million won per month, and with this monthly fee to pay, the guy urgently needed to earn more money right now. Even if he continued to work harder and produce more equipment, how could he possibly earn hundreds of millions of won in such a short time? And suddenly a brilliant thought appears in his head, like an epiphany that gives hope. He remembers how he used to make various videos with his friends, and decides that it's time to try to make money through the NewTube platform. At this time, people were sitting in a quiet train carriage. Some were sleeping, while others were silently scrolling through the newsfeed on their phones. The guy also looked at the screen and examined the headlines, but he realized that there was nothing interesting for him there. And suddenly he stumbles upon a channel with the nickname Conqueror of the World, which immediately caught his attention. He became curious and clicked on the video cover to see what was being shown. A lake appears on the screen, and several spotted hippos slowly moving in the water. Next, Shi Wu himself appears in the frame, wearing a funny hippopotamus costume. He asks the audience a humorous question. Do they know that hippos are not water horses at all? The guy who happened to be watching this video didn't understand what was going on, and why Shi Wu was wearing a ridiculous hippopotamus costume. Shi Wu begins to explain that the monsters they see now in Korea are called hypodons, and in other countries they are called hippos. This is quite logical since they look like a hippopotamus, and the word hippopotamus is denoted by the hieroglyphs for horse. However, hippos are not related to the horse family, which is often confused. The viewer continued watching the video and still did not understand whether what he said was true. Shi Wu explained that they actually belong to the hippopotamus family. They are more accurately classified as cetaceans. But going into that kind of detail would give people headaches, so he stopped there. Shi Wu then grabs a red rag and tells the audience that he will show them something really interesting. He promises to show exactly how to subdue a hippopotamus and deal with it. To begin with, according to him, the animal must be excited with a red cloth, which it immediately begins to do. Although cows do not react to the color red, the main goal here is to excite the animals and attract their attention. Shi Wu starts waving a red cloth and loudly calling the hippos to come to him. At first, the animals only wake up sleepily and move lazily, without showing much interest. But when they saw the red cloth, their eyes filled with rage and they became angry. And now a whole crowd of small hippos is rushing toward Shi Wu, ready to attack. However, the guy, not knowing fear, stands motionless and continues waving the rag. He confidently says that to defeat a hippopotamus, it is enough to simply beat it and catch it. The guy who watched the video was in complete shock and didn't believe that this was his entire strategy. Shi Wu, dressed as a hippopotamus, throws down his rag and runs boldly towards the pack of animals. He is not afraid of either the huge teeth of these animals or their furious, sparkling eyes. He runs closer and closer to them and crashes right into a huge pile of animals. A moment later, he stands up safe and sound, and the cloud of dust gradually begins to settle. There were many small hippos lying unconscious on the floor, and Shi Wu calmly says that it was too easy, and the viewer continues to sit and watch in complete bewilderment and shock. But a new group of animals was running straight towards him again. Shi Wu takes a portion of rice noodles in his hands and deftly throws it into the mouths of the animals. Then he grabs the buckwheat noodles and throws them into his mouth in the same way, and then hits him. He tells viewers that if they found his strategy helpful, they should like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. In the comments, users write that this guy is clearly crazy, but everyone laughs, has fun, and the number of views quickly grows. A notification arrives on Shi Wu's phone that more and more users are following him, and now there are 243 of them. Everything was happening exactly as Shi Wu himself had planned. And so far, everything was going smoothly and successfully. The first video had already garnered 127,000 views, and the number of subscribers continued to grow rapidly. Comments under the video said that the video was very funny and that viewers really liked it. Shi Wu realized that the audience seemed to not be into the concept of his previous video and was receiving it negatively. This time, the reaction was positive only thanks to the algorithm, because the guy can't film battles with low-class monsters forever. He recalled the well-known adage that one must strike while the iron is hot. Otherwise, success can quickly disappear. As is well known, due to the high adaptability of the audience, more and more intensity is required to maintain constant interest. And this is the guy's specialization, because analyzing monsters and developing strategies has always been his real job. Shi Wu worked as a blacksmith, sold weapons, and also filmed and edited his own videos. For him, 1 million subscribers was not just a dream, but a goal that he worked towards despite the difficulties. But on the way to this success, the guy had only one serious problem. One day, while he was sitting and editing another video, his nose suddenly started bleeding. The guy felt sick and grabbed his head, but he still understood that he had to finish the editing. Regular dungeon raids and constant deliveries were putting too much strain on his body. He couldn't take it anymore and lost consciousness. And before falling, he hit his head hard on the corner of the table. His body then fell to the floor and hit the chair, which only added to the injury. Now he lay there, exhausted, covered in bruises, and realizing that he had spent too much time at work. It was unknown how much time passed, but soon Shi Wu woke up and his face was covered in sweat. At first, the boy didn't understand where he was, but soon he recognized the ceiling of his own room. It turned out that he had passed out not for a few minutes, but for a whole day. And only the super strength of Hercules saved him from the worst. As soon as he woke up, he grabbed his phone and realized that he urgently needed to check the video and the time. The clock showed 4:30 in the morning, which shocked him. It dawned on Shi Wu that he had been unconscious for a whole day and had completely fallen off schedule. He realized that at this rate, he would die of exhaustion before he had time to earn any money. And then he decided that he urgently needed to hire a professional editor for his videos. The next day, the guy was sitting in a cafe, drinking a drink and looking through his phone. He was reviewing applications for the position of editor and did not expect that there would be so many applicants. Shi Wu wondered if so many applications came just because of the high salary. The base salary was 3 million won plus additional incentives for views, and money proved to be the best bait, so the guy wanted to choose the candidate who could bring him the most profit. He carefully studied the submitted video, noting the appropriate sound effects and good humor. His editing skills were noticeably better than Shi Wu's own, which made an impression, but he was worried that a lot of time had passed and the author of the video still hadn't appeared. The man called himself Pak Doku, and the boy remembered his name clearly. Shi Wu messaged him and asked him to meet at a cafe, which he agreed to. He thought the meeting was scheduled for 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and from the style of speech, he expected to see an adult man. The guy decided that the experienced person was even better, but he still sent another message. He noticed that his interlocutor was not reading him and thought that he might be in a hurry to get to a meeting. In the end, Shi Wu put his phone down and decided to wait a bit. After a while, the guy started to get nervous and didn't understand where the candidate had gone. Suddenly, the doors of the cafe opened, and a man entered the room, apologizing for being late. He saw the angry Shi Wu and immediately said that he came to interview the editor. In front of him stood a pretty girl with glasses, who introduced herself as Park Doku. Shi Wu was surprised because he expected to see an adult man, not a young girl. He immediately asked why she was so late and didn't even read his messages. The girl explained that she had been editing a video until late and had forgotten to pack her brother's lunchbox, which was why she was late. Shi Wu asked what kind of video she had edited, and the girl replied that she had attached it to her application. He was surprised that she had done such an edit in just 1 day, but Doku corrected him by saying that it had actually taken her about 3 hours, which amazed him even more. Shi Wu was completely shocked by what he heard and couldn't believe his ears. The girl noticed his reaction and didn't understand why he was looking at her so strangely. The guy broke the silence and addressed her, calling her by name. Not knowing what to expect, she burst into tears and asked what he wanted from her. Shi Wu calmly asked when she could start work, and the girl was surprised and asked if she really needed to start right now. The guy explained that editing usually takes him about 8 hours, but she did it in 3. He noted that the ad stated 2 videos a week, sometimes 3, and that the pay would correspond. After this, he extended his hand to her and said that he would now be under her supervision. Shi Wu happily called the girl his new editor. Doku stood up from the table, bowed low, and said she would work hard, accidentally hitting her head on the table. Suddenly, people around started to get up and run out of the cafe in panic. It turned out that a C-rank dungeon breach had begun, and residents were urgently called to evacuate. Doku called the guy boss and said that they also needed to leave quickly, but he responded differently. She was surprised by his words and did not understand what he meant. Shi Wu just smiled mysteriously and looked into her eyes. He handed the girl his phone and told her to follow him, although she didn't understand where. The guy explained that they were going to earn money, despite the danger. While all the people were running away, Shi Wu and Park Doku headed straight towards the dungeon. He turned around and told the girl to start filming. Doku quickly realized this, picked up the phone and started filming. Huge armored goblins emerged from the portal, and the people around them began screaming about the need to run. Shi Wu didn't pay attention to this, ran towards the monsters and shouted for a portion of rice noodles. He then demonstrated his strength with one powerful blow, crushing one of the goblins. He then loudly reminded viewers to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Now he was confident that he could start making real money on his channel. Helicopters arrived at the scene, along with emergency services, and everyone was ordered to immediately leave the street and take shelter. But suddenly, out of nowhere, a huge goblin head flew straight towards them, causing indescribable horror among all witnesses. People were in complete shock because they had no idea what exactly had happened and what kind of monster was in front of them. They watched as Shi Wu fought masterfully, defeating one goblin after another with incredible speed and strength. And just a few minutes later, he was already standing on a whole mountain of dead monsters, which he had destroyed with his own hands. After this, he repeated in the video that if viewers liked what was happening, they should definitely click like and subscribe. Pak Doku was already sitting at the computer in the evening, editing a video, without any understanding of what was actually happening. In the comments, people actively discussed what was happening, noting that the guards didn't know what to do, and the world itself seemed to live by its own laws, and the girl was perplexed as to why it was so popular. She edited his video, but still couldn't understand the phenomenon of his popularity and the reasons for such a furious reaction from viewers. However, she knew one thing for sure. Her boss was a real psycho who did completely crazy things. The girl put her head in her hands and wondered if she could succeed, when suddenly her younger brother and sister appeared behind her, declaring that the chicken was very tasty. Her younger brother and sister said they had left some food especially for their older sister and suggested that they all eat together. After that, they even started arguing about who would eat the last piece. But in the end, they decided to give it to their older sister. The girl's mood immediately noticeably improved, because she remembered that she had to try, at least for the sake of her younger brother and sister. Meanwhile, Shi Wu was practically living in the forge, as he worked there every day without rest and literally without stopping. The equipment he crafted from the orcs in the dungeon was much stronger, as it was made from the materials of C-class monsters, and he had high hopes for it. Suddenly, a multitude of tablets appeared in front of him, which showed that his mastery of divine metallurgy had increased, and that he had managed to create equipment that was worth even giving away for free. Shi Wu was very surprised by this, and immediately began searching for more information on the internet to figure out what was going on. Despite all the doubts, his skill had grown to 1.4%, which was an incredible result considering the speed of progress. Soyan approached the boy and said that the quality of his equipment was getting better and better each time, although the blacksmith did not understand how this was even possible. She added that such a thing was basically impossible for someone who had started blacksmithing less than a month ago, and Shi Wu just looked at her in surprise. He just laughed and said that he still had a very long way to go before he could achieve true mastery. Then So-Yoon immediately asked him if he was really going to sell this weapon, and Shi Wu confirmed it, while also asking if she knew how to do it at the highest possible price, to which the girl replied that everything should be entrusted to her. And after that, she noticed that the guy now looked much better than before, and told him about it. After all, before, the bags under his eyes reached almost to his chin, which made him look more like a zombie than a living person. At that time, she couldn't even tell if he was a human or a zombie, but now he really looked like a man who had regained his strength. Shi Wu realized that since Park Doku started editing his videos, he had a little more time to sleep, although he was still very busy. Although the last time, after he was paid his hazard pay, he had almost no funds left for additional personnel expenses, he still decided that helping with the video shooting could not be considered a full-time job as an editor, and therefore, he really should pay her fairly. Kang Du-chul was a real piece of trash who had no respect for Shi Wu's work back then and treated him with contempt. But Shi Wu had no complaints about the girl's editing skills, and since she tried so hard, he was very grateful to her. After that, he turned to Seo-yoon and asked how things were going with the medicinal herbs he had asked for last time. Seo-yoon took out the bag and said that of course she brought everything, because this was Shi Wu's first request, and she couldn't ignore it. Shi Wu was genuinely surprised, and said that it was simply incredible that she was able to get everything so quickly. The girl added that Soyeon Products always sells only the best products, although the guy still didn't understand why she said this. He then wondered how much it would cost, and Soyeon decided to calculate it all on her phone, and the total came to 212,440,000 won. Shi Wu was completely shocked, because it was a really huge amount, but the girl said that since this was his first request, she would give a discount and set the amount at 200 million won. But next time, there would be no discount. After this, the girl asked him why he needed so many medicinal herbs and where he was going to use them. Shi Wu didn't know what to answer, so he said that the herbs were needed for clinical trials related to medicine. He recently watched a video that said herbalism refers to purified natural medicines that are derived from animal, plant, or mineral sources. The forms of such drugs vary, but most often they are divided into decoctions, powders, tablets, and creams, which are the most common. Shi Wu listened to the explanations about herbs, their medicinal effects, which extend to the roots, stems, bark, fruits, and seeds of plants, and their role in medicine, but he did not understand at all what was being discussed. He realized that at this rate, he would not be able to improve the level of decline of the divine art of medicine, which made him very sad. Suddenly, a table appeared on the screen, indicating that the boy had gained high-level knowledge and his skill and insight had increased slightly. In simple terms, this video is about learning about medicinal herbs used to treat diseases and gaining knowledge about their effects. The tablet informed him that he had understood the definition of herbalism, and his mastery of the divine art of medicine had increased slightly. Later, the table reported that the guy had prepared a decoction that could be beneficial for his body and strengthen his body. Thus, the level of divine medical art proficiency increased slightly again. Shi Wu looked at the concoction he had brewed and didn't understand whether it was really edible, because it was said that it could be good for the body, but that meant that it could also be harmful. Without thinking twice, he decided to try it anyway, because it was just a decoction prepared with the help of the divine art of medicine. And could it really kill him? However, before he could finish drinking, the guy suddenly fell to the floor, and all the liquid from the cup spilled onto the floor. The taste was simply awful, and the guy realized that all his money and all his valuable herbs had been wasted. But as soon as Shi Wu heard the message sound, he immediately grabbed his phone to read the notification. The tablet informed him that he had consumed a product that could be beneficial for his body, and his super strength mastery had increased slightly. Shi Wu was very surprised because only a few seconds had passed, and he wondered if he should try drinking the rest of the potion that had spilled. After some time, the boy went to the bat cave, where vampire bats lived, which are E-rank plus monsters from the bat family. There were several reasons why the guy came to this particular place, despite the danger. Firstly, he wanted to make a video about whether bats are a type of rat. And secondly, he wanted to get loot from vampire bats to craft new equipment. Finally, he was going to study the diseases of vampire bats, because they lived in groups of at least several dozen, or even hundreds of individuals, and a wide variety of diseases lived among them. However, it was surprising that bats themselves were not susceptible to these diseases, and if we could figure out why they were so resistant to blood diseases, it could help in treating similar diseases in humans. It was certainly not easy, but with the help of the divine art of medicine, such a thing could well be possible. Suddenly, Shi Wu felt something, but it was clearly not bats, but the tracks of strangers. The guy decided it was best to avoid them for now, and just in case, he went to the edge of the cliff to look down. There he noticed a group of people, and it turned out that they were Kang Du-Chol's lackeys, and Shi Wu could not figure out how they got there at all. After all, while the dungeon is assigned to him in the Hunter Management Bureau, other hunters cannot enter it, although sometimes there are coincidences. But did he really accidentally run into Kang Do-Chol's people? These guys were supposed to be C-class hunters, and he didn't understand why they would come to an E-class plus dungeon, and it seemed like they were specifically after him, since the dungeon was an isolated area with no internet or communication. This meant that even if someone died, no one would know about it, and Shi Wu wondered what he should do now. Then he suddenly jumped up from his seat and decided that there was no need to think for long, because he would only be able to find out all the answers in battle. Meanwhile, the guys were examining the cave and asking their comrade if he was sure that Shi Wu had really gotten inside today. One of them said that he was sure because he himself saw him climb inside, and Ji Min-chul also confirmed that she saw him too. Then the third comrade wondered why he himself had not seen him, and whether Shi Wu had already died. Kim Ji-woo stated that this guy was a useless awakened, worse than even F-class, and how dare he even enter this dungeon alone, even though it only makes their job easier. Ji Min-chul said she didn't know about the rest, but the guy was smart, and he probably came up with a strategy to deal with vampire bats. Duna responded that after watching his video, it doesn't seem like he relies solely on his own strategies. Another comrade countered that anyone could say it was just manipulation or CG editing, and that it sounded ridiculous. They even began to wonder if this place was an ordinary punishment cell trap, and not a dungeon at all. But suddenly, everyone heard a strange voice, and turned around in fear to see who it was. Shi Wu roughly grabbed Kim Ji-woo by the shoulder and demanded to know where exactly Kang Do-chul was. The guy turned around in horror because he didn't feel Shi Wu approaching, and he calmly said that he didn't expect that they would tell him Kang Do-chol's location so easily. He knew it was unlikely anyone would give him an answer, and the whole team was in shock, trying to figure out where he came from and whether he had really decided to fight them. Kim Ji-woo grabbed his weapon and ran towards Shi Wu, thinking that he was useless and could not do anything. However, before he could jump, Shi Wu used his magic, and the weapon flew straight out of the attacker's hands. Then his body flipped over several times in the air, and he hit the stone wall with all his might. He ended up on the floor, shaking with fear, and his fingers were broken. Shi Wu said in a cold voice that if everyone was interested in what he was going to do next, he would demonstrate it now. Shi Wu kicked the already lying guy and said with a cold grin that it was -1. The other guys standing behind him were completely shocked and angrily called Shi Wu all sorts of names. But at that moment, Ji Min-chul flew into the wall and, losing his balance, dropped his 2 katanas from his hands. Du Yuna turned to his comrade in horror and suddenly realized that things were taking a very bad turn. He also dropped his weapon and started to stop Shi Wu, shouting that he would tell him everything right now. When he saw how joyfully Shi Wu cracked his fingers and walked towards him, he shouted even louder that he would tell everything. But Shi Wu coldly replied that he was not used to trusting the words of a man whose limbs were intact. After a while, Shi Wu directly asked Du-un if it was true that Kang Do-chol had ordered him to teach him a good lesson. The guy, all beaten and bloody, choking and writhing in pain, nevertheless confirmed that it was true. Shi Wu couldn't understand why he did this, and why there was such interest in him. Du Yuna answered haltingly that he didn't know. But when he saw Shi Wu's fist, he shouted that he really didn't know anything. Shi Wu lowered his hand and asked if he knew where Kang Do-chol was, but immediately ordered him to forget about it. He ordered the guy to gather his friends and get out of here immediately. Du Yuna was surprised to see if they were all dead, but Shi Wu calmly said that he didn't kill them. He ordered him to go and tell Kang Du-chol that the same thing would happen to him next time. Shi Wu grabbed the boy's face and asked if it would really be so difficult to say such words to his boss. And soon his entire team appeared before Kang Du-chol, beaten, some in casts, some with crutches. And behind them, like a shadow, stood Shi Wu, greeting his old friend and asking if he was eating well. The whole group started making excuses, saying that it was a misunderstanding because Shi Wu had forced them to do everything. Shi Wu, in order to set Du-yoon up, put his hand on his shoulder and said that his luring plan was great. Du-yoon began to justify himself, shouting that he was set up, and Shi Wu stated that he had a request to kill Du-chol. Frightened by the possible consequences, Du-yuna broke free from his grip and ran away headlong. After that, the other two guys apologized to Kang Du-chol and ran away as well. Shi Wu noticed that now his old friend was left completely alone and without any support. He said that this is why he should have treated them better, because if they asked to kill him, it means they suffered abuse. Kang Du-chol's face filled with rage, and he asked him with hatred how he dared to do such a thing. He couldn't understand how an E-rank hunter could possess such incredible strength. Shi Wu replied that everything was happening at the right time and asked permission to ask one question. He asked why Kang Du-chol was doing this to him because he wanted to hear the reason. Du-chol didn't understand, wondering if he really had to give the reason for his actions. Shi Wu just chuckled and said that, of course, he wasn't expecting any answer. After that, he gathered his strength and flew quickly towards his opponent to strike. Kang Du-chol barely managed to stop the attack and held his fist with his katana. Shi Wu noted that he usually only trusts the words of those whose limbs are not yet damaged. He understood that Du-chol was a different matter, since he was a B-class hunter. Du-chol immediately used his weapon and tried to strike, but Shi Wu dodged the attack. Shi Wu did a few backflips, and Du-chol noticed that his reaction was much higher than expected. Shi Wu noticed how strong and cruel his opponent's rage was, and admitted that he was even afraid. He noted that one good blow could break a sword, but he still lacked the skill to block a B-rank weapon. Kang Du-chol went on the attack again, but Shi Wu realized that his strikes were fast but too simple. As he dodged them, he suddenly remembered the old days when he worked as an editor for Kang Du-chol. Then he was treated like a slave in a dungeon and beaten for little reasons without any reason. He captured Kang Du-chol's countless monster hunts on camera and watched them hundreds of times. While editing the video, he constantly analyzed his habits, inclinations, and behavior style. Therefore, Shi Wu easily dodged attacks, and his insight and skill only grew. Du-chol slashed with his sword again and again, but Shi Wu held them back with just one hand. Together, they whirled in a fierce battle, and neither wanted to give in to the other. Du-chol tried with all his might to deliver the decisive blow, but all his efforts were in vain. He didn't understand whether the enemy could read his thoughts, since he was a B-rank hunter, and Shi Wu was only an E+. How could he possibly have the qualities of an S-rank hunter, he thought, and then received a punch to the face. He managed to stop his fall by thrusting his sword into the ground and maintaining his balance. For a second he froze, and thought that all this was simply impossible. He had studied Shi Wu's strength from videos on YouTube, so he couldn't believe what was happening. Suddenly, the strength began to leave his body, and he shouted that he would kill Shi Wu no matter what. And then his sword suddenly changed and turned into the legendary Aurora Blade. Shi Wu instantly realized that his opponent was ready to give it his all and rushed to stop him. But when it came down to it, the guy had no choice. A blue light shone around him, and Shi Wu decided that it was time to show his best as well. He used the strength of Hercules and his muscles began to tear, so he couldn't hold on for long. Jumping back, he decided to give this fight his all. In just a second, he was right in front of Kang Du-chol's face. Using all his strength and pent-up rage, he delivered a crushing blow that caused a huge explosion. The explosion raised a cloud of dust. Part of the building collapsed, and bricks and slate fell from the roof. An influential girl arrived at the scene with her group and shouted to block off the area and search for survivors. It was an inspection bureau, and they were searching for people in the cracks, loudly asking if there was anyone inside. But the only one they saw was Shi Wu, standing on his feet, safe and sound. The girl, barely noticing the stranger, immediately approached him, as if she was strongly attracted to something. She asked him if he was really the hunter named Meng Shi Wu. Shi Wu held someone else's weapon in his hand, while Nagaeva stood next to the unconscious guy, and he confirmed that everything was correct. The girl introduced herself, said her name was Li Mingzhang, said that she was the commander of the 4th Detachment of Guards at the Inspection Bureau, and showed her ID, asking him to come with her. They later ended up in an interrogation room, where the girl asked if Hunter Kangdu-chul had tried to kill the boy, and Shi Wu confirmed this, presenting the video as evidence. Li Minzhong said she checked the recording and confirmed that it was serious evidence that could not be ignored. She pointed out that Shi Wu was registered as an awakener without any traits, which seems strange. She explained that the creators are a kind of police force that protects hunters. However, at the same time, she noted that in other words, the creators hunt criminal hunters and murderers of people. Shi Wu knew that squad leaders were appointed from at least A-rank hunters, and the girl's aura seemed similar to that of an assassin to him. He asked her if the trait rank was related to the hunter's rank, and the girl said that she knew that his rank was E+. But it is for this reason, according to her, that the guy must answer this question, because in this situation, he is the victim. Li Minzhong apologized, saying that her job made her constantly suspicious of people, and added that they would investigate the case based on the records from the Arak dungeon at the construction site. She said that Kangdu-chul might never see the light of day again, and offered to finish the investigation, thanking Shi Wu for his help. Shi Wu stood up from his seat, walked towards the door, and said that he would leave further investigation in her hands. As soon as the door closed behind the guy, someone else entered the room. The girl entered the room and made sure that the squad leader was here, although she thought that after Shi Wu left, there would be no leader. The girl turned out to be a guard from the inspection bureau named Zhong Sua, and she was surprised when the leader suddenly started asking questions about the guy's rank. Zhong Sua didn't understand why she was being asked about this, since she had just recently been promoted to rank B. But suddenly, dark energy thickened around the girl, and she lost her balance, falling to the floor. Li Minzhong continued to sit motionless on her chair, but it was she who caused the girl to fall with her strength. She stood up and said that, as she expected, the girl could not withstand her strength. Zhong Sua couldn't understand what was going on. Wasn't it obvious that the squad leader had an unusual power? Moreover, there were rumors that she would soon be promoted to S rank, and she was given the nickname Human Butcher. The leader said that Shi Wu didn't feel anything from her pressure. She was surprised that if he was a low-ranking hunter, the girl simply let him go without asking any questions. As Li Minzhong left, she explained that the thing was that the guy didn't seem strange to her because he had a normal human smell. After these words, she left the room, leaving Zhong Sua alone, and she did not understand what kind of nonsense she had just heard. Meanwhile, Shi Wu walked down the street and was happy that everything ended well, although he understood that something like this could happen again. He thought that if his channel became more famous, it could very well become a target for criminal organizations. At his current level, even Kangdu-chul was a serious threat to him without synergy, knowledge of the enemy's behavior patterns, and habits. It was only thanks to his insight that he remained alive, because if you recall past difficulties, the main role was always played by his superpower. But he was confused by the fact that the superpower did not increase, remaining at the 1% mark. Shi Wu recalled that when he signed up for Hercules, he was congratulated on winning the individual training. After checking his channel, he was shocked to find that he still only had 1 subscriber. He wondered if winning this training session for this result was really worth it. The next sunny day, the boy went to the sports ground. A small figure of Hercules appeared from his phone, surprised that his only follower was a human. Shi Wu asked if the training would not take place, but Hercules replied that he could not conduct it personally. He explained that he was unable to get to where Shi Wu was and therefore could not conduct face-to-face classes. Shi Wu was shocked to find out that he had connected to GodTube and remembered the blonde man with the smartphone and the white-haired opponent. Hercules said that although he couldn't correct his posture, he could at least teach him, so there was no need to worry, and the training would begin right away. He explained that the guy's body was completely unbalanced, especially his back muscles. The posterior muscles were the back muscles that Shi Wu mentioned, and they were only part of the overall system. These include the lateral muscles, trapezius muscles, and triceps brachioradialis, which the guy learned about and, thanks to this, slightly increased his mastery of super strength. Hercules said that as the guy sees it, there are many types of hamstrings, and it is precisely because he doesn't see them that he often underestimates their importance. These muscles are extremely important, especially for maintaining overall body balance and making bold movements. Having said this, Hercules began to walk heavily across the ground, leaving dents and breaking it. He noted that the lower part of the body is especially important for proper balance and strength. After all this, Shi Wu felt something unusual that he himself could not understand. Hercules explained that these were the so-called divine martial arts, created by himself. He said that there was nothing special about it because he had simply collected all his fighting methods and systematized them into a single system. These are the very techniques he used when he defeated the Hydra, striking it straight in the head and killing it in one move. He emphasized that the muscles of the back of the body are especially important when performing such techniques. And the lower part of the body, according to him, is like the pillars that support the entire building. When Shi Wu asked what would happen if the pillars fell during the construction of the building, he himself answered that it would collapse. Hercules said that the same thing happens with the human body, after which he began to trample, creating holes. He added that if the lower part of the body collapses, then the rest of the body will also lose stability. Now, Shi Wu has mastered the knowledge of physics and slightly improved his mastery of super strength, and Hercules promised to show him the appropriate exercises. He said that breathing is about exhaling at the moment of lifting off the ground, and that is the main thing to remember. But Shi Wu didn't care about breathing and simply performed the exercises, exhaling with each movement. He found this difficult, and Hercules said that the most important thing was to do, not to ask questions. After the exercises, the guy received 18 tables of results, confirming the growth of his superpower mastery. Park Doku was sitting at her laptop and received a message from her boss, who sent her a new video to edit. The message stated that the concept of the video was a speed run, and he trusted her with the editing. The girl thought the guy was a good person, albeit a little unusual, and she became interested in what strategy he had come up with. When she turned on the video, the first thing she saw was a huge cave. Shi Wu, dressed as a bat, greeted the audience and called himself the conqueror of the world, standing in front of a backdrop of vampire bats. He stated that today he wants to show new content for his channel, Conqueror of the World. It turned out to be a speedrun raid, and the girl was deciding which parts of the video should be highlighted with editing and effects. She wondered why he'd chosen vampire bats, as they live in harsh conditions and are difficult to photograph. But it certainly attracted attention. Shi Wu revealed that the current record of 58 seconds belongs to S-rank hunter Yu Han from the Fire Witch channel. Today, he was going to break that record by conducting his own speedrun raid. He shouted loudly about the start of the raid, and Park Doku decided to set a timer for that moment. But suddenly she noticed that the guy had started doing gymnastics right in the process. Shi Wu raised his leg and slammed it onto the ground with incredible force, causing it to split into pieces. The girl who watched this was shocked and could not believe her eyes. It seemed impossible to her that an entire dungeon could be brought down in this way. In the video, Shi Wu hit himself on the head because he was supposed to be getting ingredients, but he still completed the raid. Park Doku was shocked by what she saw, but since the guy turned out to be a kind person, she made a high-quality edit. At this time, Shi Wu carefully checked his channel statistics and realized that they were at an excellent level, as there were a lot of views and the number of subscribers was steadily growing. Then he suddenly remembered Yu Han, who ran the Fire Witch channel and had over 41 million subscribers, and it seemed to him that she herself had left the comment. He saw the girl running in panic immediately after hearing the news that she had unexpectedly been stripped of her first place. The mere fact that the Fire Witch personally wrote the commentary already had a powerful effect. But if they ever get going, 1 million viewers are guaranteed. The guy was absolutely delighted and already had a vivid idea of the huge amount of money he could get. But he still decided to calm down a little. He understood that it was precisely these moments that needed to be exploited, and that he needed to start making even more provocative and daring videos to attract a new audience. He then decided to test his current level of superpower, which at the moment was exactly 2.1%. After receiving personal training from Heracles, this skill, which had never increased before, finally surpassed 2%. And now the boy was already capable of destroying a dungeon with vampire bats with only 2% strength. He thought that it would be just great if this figure could increase even more. And so he remembered the divine martial arts, deciding to ask Heracles to teach him this. Shi Wu requested to be taught divine martial arts during his personal training, but Hercules was categorically against the idea. Shi Wu started to press the point that he had already won before, but the teacher said that these were completely different things and still refused. Personal training is one thing, but divine martial arts are something else entirely, and even their names are different. And building muscle isn't his only concern. After all, divine martial arts are a method created by Hercules himself to match his strength, and without his superpower, the guy won't be able to use them. Shi Wu noted that he had used Hercules' super strength before and knew he was capable of more. The teacher, approaching the student, was shocked that he was able to use his superpower. But the boy confidently said that it was true because he was currently training. Hercules sternly replied that this was just a private lesson and was not intended to teach him his superpower. Shi Wu was in complete shock because he had already done this and did not understand why the teacher was denying the obvious. Hercules was also surprised because he thought that such a thing simply could not happen in principle. Shi Wu wondered if it was possible to learn the traits of gods through GodTube, or if what he learned was not Hercules' true superpower at all. The boy asked the teacher to wait and began to concentrate, gathering all the energy he could. A huge clot of power suddenly appeared behind him in the form of the spirit of Hercules himself. It appeared for only a few seconds and then disappeared, leaving behind blue rays that fell to the ground. The figure of the real Hercules began to grow and expand, and he himself did not understand how his student could create such a thing. Did the guy really gain superpowers just because he subscribed to his channel? And could the same be true for other gods' channels? For Hercules himself, this seemed ridiculous because it turns out that any person can become a god simply by signing up. And this is completely absurd. Shi Wu understood all this, but insisted that this method worked and was effective for him. Hercules began to suspect something was wrong and asked his student how exactly he connected to GodTube, since he was an ordinary person without a divine nature. Shi Wu told the story of how he met people in a cave and received from them a new opportunity to gain power. He also remembered how he had wandered around the cave for a long time and completely by accident stumbled upon the phone left for him by the blonde man. Hercules said that the guys Shi Wu met could be from GodTube, but the student didn't understand how such people could get to this place, since Hercules himself couldn't come here. The teacher explained what he had already said. The dimensions of humans and gods cannot interfere with each other, and the guy on the site only has a manager account. It turned out that one of the people he met was a manager, but Shi Wu only knew a few such people. However, he still shouldn't have received the power of the gods just because he signed up with a manager's account, because then the managers would become the gods of the universe. Despite this, Hercules was sure that the student had somehow acquired his superpower, and then the boy asked to be accepted as a student, but was refused. Shi Wu was shocked and didn't understand why the teacher refused, but Hercules only said that it was too much trouble. The guy began to convince him that he had already learned superpowers, but Hercules repeated again that these were completely different things. Moreover, even giving him individual training is already troublesome, and the guy is also asking to add divine martial arts. Shi Wu realized that he could not achieve anything more and asked to be allowed to ask at least one question. He asked what the GodTube subscribers actually meant, and Hercules said it could be understood as an element of divinity. Shi Wu couldn't quite figure out whether this meant that the more followers a god had, the higher his divine status, but he understood one thing: the more, the better. This is probably why Hercules continues to give him private lessons, although he himself is irritated by this because the only thing that interests him, besides muscles, is subscribers. Shi Wu decided to make an offer and said that if he could get 100 subscribers to the teacher's channel, he would have to teach him divine martial arts. Hercules did not understand how he was going to do this, because he himself could not even get into the divine world. But Shi Wu confidently believed in his own strength and asked to trust him at least once. After some time, the guy checked, and it turned out that Hercules' number of views had increased, and the number of subscribers had reached 127. Hercules came to him, and bowing down, admitted that from that day on, he would become his disciple's faithful servant. Shi Wu said that in the future, he would share interesting ideas for video content with him, but in exchange, he was obliged to teach him divine martial arts. The guy then asked what the number of followers actually meant, and Hercules explained that it could be considered a form of trust. Their divine status is formed through the trust of others, so the more people know about them, the stronger the god becomes. Shi Wu decided to check whether this meant that the divine status increased in direct proportion to the number of subscribers, and generally understood that this was the case. In any case, Hercules now agreed to teach him divine martial arts, but asked that they communicate in the same way as before. Hercules agreed with this and said that first, there was one thing the student must do. He explained that certain muscles need to be trained first, and these turned out to be not ordinary muscles at all, but brain muscles. Because a demonstration is always better than an explanation, a bright light started to come out from the phone screen, and Shi Wu grabbed his head because it suddenly started to hurt. Hercules gathered all his strength and released a powerful wave of light. Shi Wu didn't understand what exactly was happening, because the teacher's movements were so fast that he couldn't even see them in one frame. But he clearly felt the colossal pressure and realized that he had mastered the divine martial arts of Hercules. The guy noticed that his skill in using superpowers had increased significantly. Hercules turned to his student and said that he saw that he was not yet able to cope with this and must be careful. He added that his soul level was still too low, and if he tried to use divine martial arts in this state, his mind would be the first to be destroyed. So he needed to develop his brain muscles first. In other words, Hercules explained that by brain muscles he meant the level of the soul, or, to put it more simply, it is mental strength. That is, a strong psyche for mastering art. Shi Wu told the teacher that he could have warned him about this from the beginning and asked if he could still learn it. Hercules replied that normally this would be impossible, but given the unusual nature of the student, in his case, there was a chance. And all this became possible only because he is able to receive the power of the gods. If the boy can gain the power of the gods who specialize in mental strength, then she will be able to support Hercules' extraordinary strength. The teacher named Jesus, Buddha, and Confucius as examples, adding that he especially recommends Master Confucius' channel to him. Shi Wu asked if by Master Conf he meant Confucius, and Hercules confirmed that this was the case. So, all that's left for the student to do is subscribe to this channel and pay an insane monthly fee. Shi Wu sat in the forge and checked his balance, which was 153 million. But a subscription to Huatuo's channel costs between 100 million and 1 billion per month. And with such expenses, it looked absurd and completely unprofitable. His thoughts were suddenly interrupted by Soyeon, who returned with the goods. She handed the boy an ogre tendon, which he had long wanted to acquire. The girl said that it cost exactly 113 million won, which surprised Shi Wu greatly, because earlier she had said the price was 1 million. The guy still gave her the money, thanked her, and cried in his heart, because his balance was getting smaller and smaller. Seo-yoon asked him what he was going to use the ogre tendon for, and the boy replied that he was going to make equipment out of it this time. The ogre was an A+ rank monster, and while he couldn't hunt it himself yet, if he wanted to learn the martial arts of the gods, he would need a whole billion won, which meant he would need to make good equipment and sell it. Shi Wu was upset because all this required money again, and he wondered when he would be able to forge equipment for himself, since money was his eternal enemy. He picked up a hammer, rolled up his sleeves, and decided to start creating. At this time, the blacksmith entered the room and noticed the blazing fire. Then he saw Si-yoon and asked what brought her here. But when they both noticed what exactly Shi Wu was doing, they were completely shocked. They stood in amazement and watched as the boy deftly handled the weapon. In just a few minutes, Shi Wu managed to create the armor and held it up to examine it. And the blacksmith was shocked to see this item. The table announced that the boy had managed to create a one-time product, and thanks to this, his skill in divine metallurgy had increased significantly. But Shi Wu was extremely surprised, because despite the fact that he had given it his all, the product still turned out to be a disposable one. The blacksmith immediately ran up to him and could not believe that he had managed to create such a thing with his own hands. Shi Wu turned to So-yeon and asked her how much the gloves he made could be sold for. The girl was surprised by his desire to sell such rare equipment, because among their clients, there was no one who was capable of buying an item of such a level. The boy thought that there was no point in keeping the glove if he couldn't sell it profitably, and decided that it would be better to subscribe to Confucius and Huatuo in order to gain knowledge from them. He told the girl not to worry, because fate itself would sell these gloves for him, since they were just a disposable item. Seo-yeon smiled awkwardly and replied that since he entrusted her with such a task, she would do everything possible to complete it. The girl confidently said that everything should be left in her name, and asked the blacksmith if she could use his name at the auction. She thought the best option would be to put this rare work up for auction. At the same time, many people had already gathered in the hall, waiting for the presentation of the next lot. The girl loudly declared that this was exactly the kind of equipment that even Master So Pogwan himself would admire. Everyone immediately began to discuss the identity of the man, because he was the blacksmith recognized by Aurelian himself. The girl ceremoniously lifted the fabric from a clear glass box and announced that the next lot would be a pair of high-quality gloves. These gloves were made from ogre sinew, making them extremely durable and eliminating the need to worry about them breaking. And it's no wonder that, due to the fact that they were made from the tendons of an A-rank monster, their evaluation showed the ability to enhance the owner's power. Everyone present was amazed and began to whisper, wondering if this was really enchanted equipment. The girl explained that, unfortunately, it was not an enchanted item, and its enhancement was minimal, about 5%. People started discussing that even so, this was rare equipment with a special effect, and the gloves would be perfect as a support item. The girl noticed that their reactions showed that she would simply be torn apart if she hesitated. And so, she announced the start of the auction with a starting price of 10 million won and an increment of 5 million. The bidding immediately started, with participants raising their numbered signs and raising their prices ever higher. Each time the step increased, and the final price rose higher and higher. When the price of 350 million was announced, the girl began to worry and turn around, thinking that perhaps no one else would risk raising the bid. But suddenly someone from the back of the room shouted loudly that he was ready to pay 2 billion. All the people were in complete shock and immediately turned to see who had made such a huge bet. At number 8 sat a girl named Ha Chedin. The auctioneer was astonished and began to inquire whether there was an even higher bid. Then girl number 76 suddenly raised the price to 2,100 million. Everyone turned around in surprise and found out that it was Lee Min-jong herself who did it. Seeing her menacing look, they immediately remembered that she had been nicknamed Butcher. But Ha Chedin was not about to give up and confidently placed her bet at 3 billion. Lee Min-jong also did not back down and raised the bid to 3,100 million, causing the auction to become increasingly tense. Ha Che-rin decided to end the bidding and shouted out a bid of 4 billion. The auctioneer confirmed her words and asked if there was anyone willing to offer more. She started counting, counted to 3, and loudly announced that the lot had sold for 4 billion. Ha Che-rin stood up proudly from her seat and walked towards the newly acquired gloves. Meanwhile, So-yeon and Shi-woo were in the forge, discussing the incredible price the gloves had been sold for, something they had never even dreamed of. Shi-woo looked at his account and saw a deposit of 3,600 million, realizing that this was truly insane. Although the winning bid was 4 billion, after deducting the 5% commission, taxes, and service fee transferred to So-yeon, the boy still received a huge amount. He immediately rushed to hug the girl and joyfully repeated how much he loved her. So-yeon found herself trapped in his tight embrace and begged him to let her go, as she could no longer breathe. Shi-woo finally let her go and realized that he had probably gotten too excited. So he decided that he should give her something as a token of gratitude. So-yeon refused the gifts because he had already paid her for her services, and thanks to him, their company became VIPs in the auction house. And that was enough for her. Shi-woo turned to the blacksmith, but he replied that he didn't mind because the guy did it all himself and fully deserved the money. Then the guy decided to learn how to beat the Allegro rhythm, which he had recently learned in Hephaestus's video, because he still had 4 battles ahead of him, and this skill should come in handy. Shi-woo picked up his phone and saw a message that his subscription to the Confucius channel had been completed, and it now cost him 1 billion won per month. He decided that if he really wanted to learn divine martial arts, he had to subscribe and could not be stingy. Although this was a huge amount of money, even for him, he still overcame himself and subscribed to Confucius's channel. Later, he was sitting with his sister in a restaurant, and the girl asked in surprise whether the place they had chosen was too expensive for a simple snack. So A sheepishly said that she didn't have to eat there, but the guy insisted that she should try something like this at least once in her life. The price was 600,000 per person. But it didn't matter to him because he had 2,600 million in his account, and the subscriptions were costing him 1,100 million. Shi-woo calmly sipped his drink and decided that he needed to stop thinking too much about expenses. He simply opened the GodTube app to pass the time until their food arrived. Having visited Confucius's page, he studied it carefully. He had as many as 34,000 subscribers, and the guy thought that, apparently, Confucius's students subscribed to his channel, which means that school networks exist on GodTube too. He learned that learning divine martial arts required brain muscles and didn't expect it to be an SSS rank skill. Considering that it wasn't a combat ability, such a high rank meant it was even more significant than the divine martial arts themselves. The guy realized that to improve his skills, he first needed to watch training videos and understand the basics. Confucius sat outdoors in a small wooden gazebo and addressed the audience. He said that a gentleman is a person who cares and looks after those around him. Shi-woo began to feel very bored, but still managed to master the basics of Confucius's teachings. His levels of benevolence, righteousness, decency, and gentlemanly wisdom have increased slightly. Later he talked with Hercules, who realized that the boy had acquired only part of the brain muscles of Master Confucius, and not yet completely. Hercules explained that divine martial arts are not something that can be used at a low level, as they change the laws of the world and do not simply use superpowers. Shi-woo had to draw mana by concentrating on the veins and pressure points, because mana is the basis of existence, and to use it, the guy needs a hurricane of enhancement. This hurricane was supposed to project his intention and facilitate the impact on mana, and the Eastern gods called it the center of chi. Suddenly, the guy's phone screen lit up with a bright glow. Hercules realized that the boy simply wanted to gain divine martial arts and strength without delving into complex concepts. But even if that was the case, he wasn't sure the boy could handle it and doubted his readiness. As expected, the man came up with a way to make mastering divine martial arts easier, and the key was in his own muscles. After all, if a guy's body is in bad shape, his mind will suffer. So he must build up his muscles and grasp concepts gradually. He needs to leave the headache-inducing knowledge to his muscles and learn through physical development. At this time, in the SH Group's apartment, the grandfather said that he heard that his granddaughter had recently bought new and very valuable equipment. Han Charon confirmed his words and added with a smile that she was indeed extremely pleased with her recent purchase. Grandfather noted that he had heard talk that her new equipment cost as much as 4 billion, and he was very impressed by this. Charon explained that although this item cannot be compared to Master Aurelian's legendary sword, it is an excellent auxiliary equipment, and she can already feel how her skills have increased thanks to just one piece of equipment. Han Tae-san, the group's chairman, was delighted by this and said that if his granddaughter ever needed his help, she should speak up. Charon bowed politely and thanked her grandfather for his concern and willingness to help her in any endeavor. She then added that she thought they could start something, and her words made the man frown slightly. It turned out that Charon was referring to the raid into the dangerous S-rank dungeon that they were planning to undertake. The next morning, Shi Wu trained hard outside, but he knew that he was not yet able to master the divine martial art properly. Deciding to take a short break, the guy took his phone out of his pocket and held it in his hands to distract himself from his heavy thoughts. He became increasingly worried that he couldn't improve his level and doubted whether he was even capable of doing so. Earlier in one of the videos, someone asked Confucius if there was a way to not lose a fight that cannot be won, and the teacher replied that there was such a way. Confucius said that to never lose a battle, you simply need to not finish it, but continue fighting until the end. Shi Wu remembered that Hercules was also once an ordinary man, but he became a hero through tremendous effort and tireless fighting. There were times when he too was disappointed in himself, because divine martial arts sometimes make one doubt whether a person is capable of achieving it. Shi Wu didn't consider himself talented, but he understood that all he needed now was endless effort and perseverance. He concentrated, and at that very moment, a huge wind rose, and dozens of fallen leaves began to swirl across the ground. Shi Wu took a fighting stance. The ground beneath his feet began to crack, and the wind grew stronger and stronger. The tablet declared that an unbending will filled his body, and the gentleman's level of benevolence, righteousness, and wisdom had increased slightly. But suddenly something distracted the guy from his concentration, and he opened his eyes in horror. He saw that a huge gust of wind had blown away most of the earth and trees, and now he was actually using Heracles' divine martial art. Between the trees there now stood a huge, long hole, as if formed by a monstrous blow. The guy realized that he would now have to look for a suitable training center, and at the same time thought about how much money would be spent on compensation for the destruction. At this time, Pak Doku was sitting at her desk and diligently working on assignment. She received a message from her boss asking her to edit the video he sent her, but it turned out to be the same video with the bat as last time. The Fire Witch once again broke the boss's record on her channel and once again took first place, her incredible record lasting only 11 seconds. The attack ended as quickly as it began. However, the girl was alarmed by the fact that Shi Wu had made a video with a very similar concept. Park Doku finished uploading the video and decided to immediately check its contents. Shi Wu, dressed as a witch, greeted viewers of his channel, calling himself a man who can conquer the whole world. He said that a new record was recently set on the Fire Witch channel, 11 seconds, which is almost impossible to beat. So today he was going to try and defeat the Fire Witch Yu Hanu and show the audience how it could be done. He noted that viewers were probably wondering why he suddenly targeted Yu Hanwu, as if he really tried to do so, he could get hurt, so he couldn't act without preparation. Therefore, the strategy he was going to show the audience was how to defeat the Fire Witch, who was ranked first. He shouted loudly that it was time to stop empty talk and start taking action. Then he raised his leg high into the air and kicked the ground with all his might. But as soon as he did this, the camera fell sharply and broke. Park Doku, who was sitting and watching this video, was completely shocked by what she saw. However, she remembered that her boss had sent her 2 videos at once. When she turned on the second one, she was amazed, because it started from the moment when Shi Wu raised his leg. A portal glowed next to him, and when he hit the ground, the camera next to the portal fell, and the space itself began to distort. A huge gorge immediately appeared next to the guy, and he said that now, thinking about it, he understands that he could train in the dungeon. Park Doku was extremely surprised and did not understand at all what exactly she was watching. Her hands were shaking, and she noticed something odd. Namely, the unusual length of the video. It lasted only 4 seconds. And this struck the girl even more. Shi Wu looked at the channel statistics, and the number of views, comments, and subscribers was rapidly increasing thanks to his divine martial arts. So at this rate, earning hundreds of millions of won was no longer a dream. Someone in the comments wrote that Han Charon recently failed a dungeon raid. Immediately, many people began to ask what exactly had happened, and were interested in whether the girl was alive, although all of this seemed like just rumors. Others claimed that they had checked the information, and it turned out to be true since it had already been written about in articles. Shi Wu was in complete shock and couldn't believe this news. Headlines were filled with questions about the future of the SH group after the failure of the S-rank dungeon raid. It was reported that even representatives of the Hunters Guild confirmed Charon's failure, and although there were no casualties, the raid was extremely important, and therefore the news caused great disappointment. Shi Wu noticed that it was not stated anywhere how exactly the girl had failed. Then he thought that none of this had anything to do with him, because he didn't have time to worry about Charon, and she had to deal with her own problems. Meanwhile, Karen went up to the group's headquarters on the top floor, where she was greeted coldly by a girl. Charon was clearly not pleased with this meeting, but she responded to the greeting politely and reservedly. In front of her stood the director of the SH group, Han Mina, who was her aunt. She started laughing and asked with a grin if her niece had decided to return after talking with the chairman. Charon coldly remarked that his aunt had probably also come to see him on business. Han Mina said the chairman urgently called a management meeting because the company was in chaos. Stock prices had plummeted, and investors were withdrawing their money en masse. She emphasized that it was not her niece's fault at all, but only their own, because they expected too much from her. The aunt told the girl to leave, otherwise she risked running into her brothers. Charon was left standing alone in the hallway, thinking over every word her aunt had said. At the same time, Shi Wu was giving his sister some medicinal soup that tasted bitter. He was glad that his skills in the divine martial art of medicine were gradually improving, because the soup turned out more edible than last time. After studying the gentleman's mind, all of his stats improved. Not only did his martial arts increase, but also his super strength, insight, and divine metallurgy. Insight has increased especially, as it is linked to other characteristics, and it is no wonder that Gentleman's Mind has the SSS rank. When Soa finished her soup, the guy noticed that her complexion had noticeably improved. This meant that his concoction was indeed very effective, and if he continued to refine the divine art of medicine, he would definitely cure his sister's illness. The only problem was money, because a monthly subscription to the teachings of Hua Tuo and Confucius cost 1,700,000,000, and what he had was not enough. The guy thought it would be great to sell such a concoction, but he realized that it was impossible to distribute a medicinal product without special certification. Therefore, he decided that he would need to ask Soyan about this, who could suggest the right path. Suddenly, his thoughts were interrupted by a knock on the door, and he and his sister turned around in surprise. Outside, someone apologized and asked if Lady Diane was there with Mr. Meng Shi Wu. The man introduced himself as Miss Han Chedin's secretary, and he gave his name, Kang Min-jae. He reported that his mistress was going to go into the dungeon again and needed help. Shi Wu was surprised that the girl decided to go into the dungeon again, because it meant that she really needed support. He asked the man if Charon really wanted him to come up with a new strategy for her, and then he asked what exactly happened in the dungeon when she went there alone. Min-jae apologized and replied that he didn't know the details, since the girl only said that Shi Wu's help was extremely necessary for her. He added that the lady wanted to come in person, but because many people were constantly following her, she sent a secretary in her place. Min-jae asked Shi Wu if he could at least meet and talk to the girl. Meanwhile, Shi Wu was already imagining the sweet smell of success and how he would post a video of himself and Han Chae-rin going through a dungeon together, receiving a huge number of views. Shi Wu arrived at the SH Group headquarters and entered the gym, where he noticed Chae-rin working out hard and noticed the gloves he made himself. The girl held the sword in her hands and swung it with great confidence, completely immersing herself in the training, not sparing her strength and demonstrating her skill. Kang Min-jae said that he would call the girl now, but Shi Wu stopped him and asked him to wait a little, wanting to assess the situation himself. He recalled his previous trance training, realizing that training with this level of concentration could produce incredible results. since he had had a similar experience before. He informed the secretary that it might be a bit of a wait, but that a rare and valuable opportunity could present itself for Charon. Charon trained so diligently that she completely ignored the presence of other people around her and was not distracted by anything extraneous. Shi Wu noticed that the girl's movements were definitely not systematic and looked chaotic, although she seemed to be focused. Perhaps it was due to his improved understanding after studying insight and divine martial arts, as her movements were nothing more than random hand movements. He had also heard that Charon had not yet learned to wield a sword properly, which explained the somewhat crude quality of her skill despite her talent. One of the girl's characteristics was her talent with the sword, but her crude handling of weapons was overshadowed by her natural strength, as if she could use superpowers but had not learned divine martial arts for systematic use. Swordsmanship based on brutality will eventually show its limitations, and the only way for Charon to develop significantly is to join the sect as a disciple. However, Shi Wu didn't understand why Charon would need to do this, since the SH group wouldn't allow her to become a member anyway if she joined the sect. And then her background wouldn't be of any use. However, at Charon's level, the guy thought that she would be able to maintain the martial arts skills she learned on GodTube if she continued to practice on her own. King Arthur, the legendary Knight of the Round Table, was the wielder of the divine sword Balmung, whose name was known to all in legend. Siegfried, the first dragon slayer, was considered one of the key heroes of Germanic Scandinavian mythology, whose exploits remained an example for hunters. Zhang Yu was an invader with a huge army numbering tens of thousands of men, demonstrating strength and strategic genius in battle. Although their training videos looked a bit crazy, if Charon could master their martial arts, she would have an incredible experience. But she didn't have access to GodTube. The guy realized that he could just watch the video and teach her himself, although this required paying for a subscription. But he could get money from Charon for the training. It didn't matter whether it was 1 billion won or 10 billion won for the SH Group's granddaughter. It didn't matter, because he might even get paid for his education. Shi Wu thought that this was a great deal, because the girl's financial power could greatly help him in the future. However, there was a problem. Whether Han Cherian, an A-rank hunter, would be willing to take lessons from a D-rank hunter, which seemed doubtful. Moreover, he could only teach her what he himself had learned, and the question remained whether it was possible to master a divine martial art by studying it on one's own. However, if the boy gave up now, everything would be in vain. And suddenly, Charon approached them, interrupting their thoughts. The secretary apologized to the girl, explaining that Shi Wu did not want to interrupt her training so as not to interfere with her concentration. Charon, all sweaty, dried herself with the towel and decided not to get angry, despite the inconvenience, showing patience and fortitude. Shi Wu, standing opposite the girl, became a little embarrassed and blushed, not expecting such closeness and tension. The girl walked past him and said that she would first go wash herself, and the guy, watching her, thought about her beauty and grace. They sat opposite each other, and the girl noticed that it seemed like Shi Wu had been waiting for her for a long time, but he replied that this was not so, because he heard that she needed his help. Shi Wu decided to ask directly what happened in the dungeon, trying to understand the true reasons for her upset. Charon lowered her head sadly and reported that there was no monster in the dungeon back then, which no one expected. When she entered there with her comrades, there was initially no one there, and this surprised them a little. But then they encountered a dangerous monster that immediately attracted attention and caused alarm. Although he looked like a wolf, it was hard to call him an ordinary monster, because Charon had never seen anything like it before. Wolf monsters were rare, and in her memory, they almost never appeared in S-rank dungeons, making the situation unique. Charon's hands trembled, and she said that she couldn't do anything against this powerful monster, showing fear and confusion. Even though the dungeon was S-rank, and Charon's strength was A+, she couldn't win, which Shi Wu thought was natural. Moreover, Charon participated in the raid with talented comrades possessing incredible equipment, and yet they still failed, which was unexpected. Shi Wu summed it up. There was only one monster in the dungeon, and it was so strong that even Charon couldn't handle it. A dungeon's rank is usually determined by the total amount of mana in it, so it's rare to judge it by a single monster, but such cases do occur. This phenomenon was called a mutation, which did not please the hunters at all and was considered a rare threat. The concept of mutation is different from the term capo monster, which refers to particularly powerful creatures in dungeons. The monster, which possessed all the mana in the dungeon, posed a great threat, so Charon explained that she would not be able to deal with it. The capo monster was particularly dangerous, and given its S rank, it was highly likely that this was the kind of monster they were facing. Sharon was surprised because she had never heard of anything like this before and did not expect to encounter such a danger. Shi Wu said that it was better to abandon this dungeon because a second visit was extremely dangerous and the girl could die. However, Sharon stood her ground and declared that she had to go through the dungeon, explaining that he wasn't the only one with problems. Shi Wu realized that due to the raid's failure, Charon's group suffered huge financial losses, as hundreds of billions of won disappeared within minutes of the article's publication. To prevent the stock price from falling even further, the girl needs to fix the situation as soon as possible and act decisively. She said that she must fix everything again and succeed in her dungeon raid, demonstrating determination and courage. Of course, it was extremely life-threatening, but the trillions of won and risks were worth the attempt, because the monster was new and previously unknown. Shi Wu said he understood everything and offered one condition: permission to film the entire process on YouTube to document the strategy. Charon was surprised, as she had never heard of such an idea before, and Shi Wu immediately asked her for 10 billion won for his services. He couldn't go below that amount and smiled, demonstrating confidence and cunning in negotiations. After some time, Shi Wu received an advance of 1 billion won and decided that perhaps he should have asked for more. Surprised by the girl's ease of agreement, he decided not to be greedy because 10 billion was already a huge sum, and it was not worth risking his reputation for more. The high-ranking capo monster was new and never seen before, and the guy wasn't even sure he could come up with the right strategy if he asked for too much. However, Shi Wu's potential was 24%, and he was confident that he could at least analyze this monster. The next day, they both found themselves outside an S-rank dungeon, prepared to face the danger and unknown within. Charon stepped forward and announced that she would lead the guy, and he understood that the girl allowed him to go into the dungeon on the condition that she accompany him. In fact, it was extremely dangerous, but he didn't want to go there alone, and he needed to explore the dungeon to develop a strategy. Moreover, thanks to his superpower and knowledge of divine martial arts, although he was not sure of victory, he would at least survive. The atmosphere of the dungeon was definitely different from the lower ranks, and this was immediately felt upon entering, creating tension. Charon didn't stop and kept saying that we needed to move on, but the fear gradually increased, making the path more and more dangerous. Shi Wu noticed that the girl often adjusted her gloves, as if checking their comfort and condition before the fight. He asked if they didn't suit her, and the girl confirmed that they did, which required adjustments. The guy asked to be allowed to adjust the gloves so that they would be perfect for fighting and movement. He said he didn't know who would use them, so he made them to fit his hands, but it should still be comfortable for others. Shi Wu pressed the stone on the gloves, and they began to sparkle with blue light and shrink to the right size, surprising Charon. He smiled and told the girl to consider it a favor and a sign of his concern for her comfort and efficiency. Charon asked how he knew about the gloves' function, and the guy didn't reveal that it was because he made them himself. The girl was surprised and asked if he was the one recognized by Master So Palguan, to which Shi Wu replied that he did not know about it. He just worked in the same workshop with him. They stood looking at each other for a few seconds, and then a strange and alarming sound distracted them, drawing their attention to the danger. Shi Wu turned around in great surprise, his eyes burning with fear, because something incomprehensible was approaching them with enormous force. The ground began to shake, and he felt an incredible energy coming from an unknown source, which made him wary. Raising his head, he noticed the huge red eyes of a predator, sparkling in the darkness and instilling terror. An incomprehensible creature emerged from the bushes, and its companions were almost as tall as the girl's leg, which made them very large. Shi Wu was shocked, because the energy emanating from the monster was completely different and was at a completely different level of strength. Charon thrust her sword forward and demanded that the boys step back, protecting him and preparing for battle. In front of them stood a huge wolf with sharp teeth, saliva flowing from its mouth, and its eyes glowing red, instilling horror and fear. Shi Wu was wondering if his friend would be able to defeat this black wolf, and what if he joined her? But moreover, they were not even prepared and came here only to find out what kind of monster it was. At this moment, they should not have been fighting at all, but blue magic suddenly appeared around the guy, illuminating the space around him. His eyes were shining, and he tried to carefully analyze the monster, trying to understand its strength and weaknesses. He then swung his leg and hit the ground hard, causing it to crack, causing a scattering of rocks and dust. Without wasting any time, he grabbed the girl by the shoulder and shouted loudly that they urgently needed to escape from danger. They both ran, using all their strength and breathing heavily, trying to break away from the approaching threat and save their lives. The last thing the boy noticed was that a full moon was shining in the night sky, illuminating their path with a faint silver light.
Together, they ran to the portal, jumped into it, and found themselves in another place, where they could at least temporarily rest.
Shi Wu couldn't be sure of anything since he hadn't fought the monster directly, but at least 5 S-class hunters would be able to deal significant damage to it. Charon asked her friend what kind of force it was that surrounded him during their escape. Shi Wu asked her a counter-question about how she was able to return alive and with her teammate, having managed to avoid meeting the monster. Charon replied that she was just lucky, and the guy asked if she really wanted to attack that monster again. The girl answered without the slightest hesitation that she was absolutely obliged to do this, despite the danger posed by the monster. And if a partner develops a strategy, then their team will be able to do everything it takes to defeat this dangerous creature. They looked at each other in silence for a long time, realizing how dangerous the upcoming battle would be and how careful they needed to be. Shi Wu started pacing back and forth and said that he would contact her later once he had managed to thoroughly analyze the wolf and make a plan of action. At home, he rewatched the recorded video and carefully examined the wolf's face, in whose mouth a red knife was stuck, causing surprise. He couldn't figure out what kind of monster it was. A kappa was a species that was a modified version of a normal creature. There had to be an original monster from which it came. He opened the association's published Encyclopedia of Monsters, but no matter how much he searched the internet, he couldn't find any information about it. Even after using his insight, he still couldn't find a single clue that would help him identify this creature. The next day, the boy went to training, where the teacher said that he could stop there, but he successfully completed the Hercules-level exercise, improving his skills. Shi Wu lay on the floor. He had very little strength left. He was breathing heavily, but his super strength, skill, and divine martial art continued to improve. Hercules was surprised because the guy was already lying on the ground only after such intense exercises, demonstrating the limits of human capabilities. Without thinking twice, Shi Wu grabbed his phone and looked at the screen, trying to figure out what information he could extract to analyze the monster. Hercules also became curious. He looked in and asked what exactly the guy was looking at, intrigued by the student's unusual behavior. Shi Wu told the teacher about the monster he had recently analyzed, trying to understand its origins and capabilities. Today is already the 3rd day, and the guy still does not understand what kind of creature it is and how to deal with it. Hercules became curious and asked to see the video so he could assess the threat himself. Shi Wu, noticing the teacher's gaze, asked if he knew what it was and what they might encounter. The man suggested it was a Fenrir, a mythical creature from Norse mythology known as a demon wolf. Fenrir appears in Norwegian mythology, and his other names include a demonic wolf and a wolf of divine slaughter, possessing great strength. The reason why the Fenrir is so called is simple. It was this creature that brought about the end of the world, known as Ragnarok. With its upper jaw reaching to the edges of the sky and its lower jaw reaching to the edges of the earth, the monster devours everything in between, threatening the entire world. Fenrir bites and kills even Odin, a powerful god from Norse mythology, demonstrating unfathomable strength. Shi Wu was both amazed and surprised, trying to figure out what this monster was doing here and how it got here. An unknown guy gave him a smartphone with GodTube content, including information about Fenrir, which left him confused. In this scenario, Hercules is probably the only one who still doesn't know how this mythical beast got here. Shi Wu asked the teacher if it was really Fenrir, and he replied that it seemed so. He had already fought with it once. But of course, he won. Shi Wu wondered if it would be possible for him to fight this monster then, given his own strength and experience. Hercules replied that he was not sure, because this battle could end instantly, probably without lasting even a second. He explained that until the monster had torn him to pieces, it was impossible to accurately assess its threat, although the enormous potential for danger was visible. From this, it is clear that Fenrir has become significantly weaker. His physique has changed, and now he resembles a wolf cub. But despite its reduced size, the monster was still the size of a small hill, and, given the mythology of Fenrir, remained extremely dangerous. Hercules noticed decorations on the monster that he had never seen before, which could indicate special limitations or enhancements. He pointed his finger at the screen so that the boy could examine the details carefully and assess the possible influence of these decorations on the monster's strength. A red chain hung from one of the paws, and it seemed to suppress the Fenrir's power, limiting its destructive potential. Shi Wu asked the teacher what kind of handcuffs these were and tried to understand how they could affect the outcome of a fight with such a powerful creature. The teacher replied that it was Gleipnir, which could never be destroyed by anything that existed in this world, possessing incredible strength. Hercules said that with a monster like that, He thought it would only take a minute before Fenrir could tear anyone to pieces.
Shi Wu couldn't understand how the Fenrir came here and why. If this black wolf was really a Fenrir, then there was practically no way to explain its appearance. Hercules stood there, wondering whether to tell his student about the monster's weaknesses. But Shi Wu immediately interrupted him and promised to share an idea for video content for 200 subscribers. Hercules immediately disappeared, became a spirit, took the phone and said that he would organize the materials and bring them right now for analysis. Charon was in the office building next to the guy, waiting in the dungeon next to the paparazzi, who kept asking why she didn't give in. After that, she opened the door and noticed that everyone she was waiting for was already here, and they needed to go to the dungeon. The warriors noticed Shi Wu filming a video for his followers and were surprised, wondering who he really was. One of the guys said that he was a YouTuber, and his channel was called Conqueror of the World, which sparked interest among those around him. The man with the scar on his face said he didn't think it was a really famous channel, wondering what such a psycho was doing there. The blonde guy replied that he was said to be the one who came up with the strategy for this dungeon, which caused confusion among everyone present. The scarred man thought that the team members' unusual support conditions and the presence of a strange person should have been the team leader, and Charon was in despair. Suddenly, someone told him to calm down and asked what he was going to do if things ended badly. But the man said that there was no need to say such unpleasant things. Everyone just needed to prepare to enter the dungeon. And now a huge army was inside the S-rank dungeon, led by Han Charon, ready for the upcoming battle. Shi Wu walked next to her, filming everything that was happening on his phone and telling his followers where they were and what was happening. He asked the audience if they felt a huge energy, and the scarred man was shocked that this person was filming a video at such a critical moment. What would happen if the black wolf noticed this, they wondered, watching his reaction to their presence and activity. Suddenly, the wolf raised his head up, noticing an unusual red glow that was emanating from the army and those present around him. Above them towered a huge head with red eyes, radiating menace and demonstrating the strength of the Fenrir. The entire army closed their eyes. Everyone was scared, but this did not affect Charon. She did not retreat and prepared for battle. Charon wondered if it was the right decision to repeat the raid, if she was really leading people to their deaths, if she shouldn't have asked an S-rank hunter for help. She decided that she should not accept help from high-level hunters, believing that the sortie was difficult and the group's first approach should be solely SH power. Everyone must have known that the SH group's strength was fearsome, and the girl took up her sword, fully prepared to fight, showing confidence and determination. Shi Wu explained that it was the legendary mythical beast Fenrir, also known as the demon wolf, which appears in Norse mythology and is dangerous to everyone. Everyone asked the guy if it was really Fenrir, but he replied that he wasn't sure, because even with all his knowledge and experience, it was difficult to determine exactly. And now the monster's mouth was right in front of him, threatening everyone with its powerful appearance and red eyes, causing horror and anxiety. Shi Wu said he thought they should fight this monster to find out the truth, assess its strength, and understand what they were dealing with. Isn't Shi Wu the one who can conquer the entire world and crush any force that stands in his way? Even if Fenrir himself, a huge wolf capable of devouring entire worlds, appeared before him, this would not be an insurmountable problem for the young man. Shi Wu turned sharply towards Charon, but did not ask her if she was ready to share this fight with him. He had only just begun to explain to the girl the first point of a carefully thought-out strategy for attacking Fenrir. The next second, the guy took off, leaving behind sparkling blue rays of magic, and flew swiftly towards the monster. Charon froze in a complete stupor and could not comprehend what her partner was doing at that moment. She couldn't understand how he had managed to get so close to the monster that loomed over them. The black wolf let out a low growl and, raising his huge paw, prepared to deliver a crushing blow. Charon saw this and shouted at Shi Wu, begging him to be careful and not to be reckless. The monster struck with its paw, but hit the ground, and from this blow, the surface split into pieces. The girl noticed that Shi Wu was no longer at the scene of the blow, and in despair, she wondered where he had managed to disappear to. Shi Wu, without any effort and with great speed, appeared right next to the huge wolf's face. Using his power, he struck the monster's face with all his might, wanting to stop it. All the warriors who were watching this closed their eyes from the bright rays of magic and did not understand what exactly was happening. Shi Wu landed on the ground, and the monster, unharmed, only glared at him angrily. The guy was breathing heavily and was covered in sweat because it had been a direct hit, but the monster still remained unharmed. He wondered how this was possible, since Hercules had assured him that this particular attack would definitely work. The enraged wolf began to scream and furiously beat his paws on the ground, causing the air to tremble. Huge boulders flew up in a small radius around him, causing powerful explosions. Even small stones, like sharp fragments, flew in different directions, creating chaos. Charon turned to her warriors and firmly declared that it was now time for them to join the battle as well. The girl drew her sword and rushed straight into battle first, without hesitating for a moment. Shi Wu suddenly turned around in surprise, because he noticed something strange about what was happening. The wolf tried to attack him again, but the boy, sitting on the ground, managed to dodge the blow. Previously, Shi Wu thought that perhaps the one in front of them was not the real Fenrir, but now he realized that he was very wrong. Hercules once said that the guy would have at least 1 minute before he was torn apart, but he couldn't even hold out for 10 seconds. Hercules' strategy proved pointless because it only works when Hercules himself applies it. But the wolf still had Gleipnirs, shackles that limited his movements and gave him at least some chance. It's not so bad if the guy can't defeat the monster. What's really bad is if he can't at least attack. It was at that moment that Charon appeared next to the wolf, swung her sword, and wounded him in the face. Now, the most important thing for Shi Wu was that he was no longer alone in this battle. Fenrir turned in rage at the one who dared to wound him and make him shed blood. After this, the wolf began to growl furiously, and fiery energy gradually began to appear around him. All the warriors raised their heads and saw that a huge fireball had begun to form above the monster. Recently, the mages entered the battle, and it was they who created this fire sphere to attack the monster. A red-hot beam of fire began to fall rapidly from a small height onto the wolf's head. The monster burst into flames and screamed, but then raised its head and began to forget about the pain. The magicians did not lose their heads and decided to attack the monster again, strengthening their spell. Fenrir opened his mouth wide and began to absorb the fire as if it were his weapon. The mages were amazed that he was able to swallow the fire sphere and did not believe that such a thing was even possible. The wolf raised his head again and began to feed on the fire that was forming around him faster and faster. One of the commanders shouted loudly to the detachment that they should not retreat under any circumstances and should hold on. The other part of the warriors raised their shields in their hands and began to prepare for close combat. Shi Wu told the girl that if she looked closely, she could see shackles tied to the wolf's body. If these shackles continue to hold him, there will be a chance for an attack. Charon looked at her comrade, nodded confidently, and showed that she understood everything perfectly. After this, the girl jumped up from her place, and in her place there remained only blue rays of magic. She flew straight to the wolf's head, and her warriors loudly shouted words of encouragement. At this time, Shi Wu tried to calm his emotions and focus all his senses for the attack. Blue rays of magic gradually began to form around him, becoming brighter and stronger. He found himself next to the monster with great speed, moving faster than the wind. Flying straight towards his face, Shi Wu extended his hand forward to deliver a crushing blow. Fenrir swung his paw, but missed and hit only the ground. At this time, the guy found himself in a completely different direction, and the wolf was surprised by his agility. Shi Wu used his super strength, calling upon Hercules' magic to break through the monster's defense. A single, huge blue beam formed around him, heading straight towards the monster. Fenrir couldn't move. He was bound by a magical sphere, depriving him of freedom. The guy realized that the superpower was finally working, and he had to keep putting pressure on the monster. But suddenly, everything around started spinning, and the world began to change, shimmering with strange colors. Shi Wu fell to the ground, and a thin stream of blood flowed from his chest. This was extremely dangerous, because if he had reacted a little later, the attack would have torn his body apart. Shi Wu wasn't sure, but he felt like something had gone wrong before the wolf touched his body. Fenrir hesitated for a moment before delivering his blow. At that moment, a girl appeared nearby and dealt a powerful blow with her sword to the monster's paw. Shi Wu knew that the monster could easily kill him at this moment, but why didn't he do this, but only slightly injured the young man? When the wolf received a strong blow, he screamed loudly in pain, and his howl echoed throughout the plain. There was a deep bleeding scratch on his body, from which scarlet blood flowed in thin streams. Shi Wu realized that he had to pull himself together, because he had to take advantage of the chance and show his abilities. He tensed, and in a few seconds he was right next to Fenrir, covering the distance in a single dash. Then, using his magic, he delivered a powerful blow straight into the monster's chest. The wolf began to cough and spit blood, experiencing severe pain. After that, he raised his paw over the youth, and Shi Wu realized that the decisive moment had come. Without wasting any time, he grabbed the red chain that held the monster's paw. The monster's eyes widened, and his extreme surprise was evident in them. Shi Wu pulled the huge red chain towards himself with all his might, straining his entire body. The monster screamed and furiously tried to resist the guy's strength. At that moment, Shi Wu gathered all his magic and the last remnants of his strength. After that, he pulled the hook with one jerk and lifted the monster into the air. Charon reacted instantly and with burning eyes flew towards the monster. The boy let go of the chain and jumped to the side before the wolf could attack again. A powerful sword strike flew through the air, tearing apart the space around. The troop commanders looked on in shock and said that all this was sheer madness. A huge hole appeared in the ground, and Shi Wu lay in it, screaming that he was still alive. Charon sat on the ground, holding her sword tightly, trying to catch her breath after the hard battle. But suddenly, the ground beneath them began to crack loudly. Shi Wu was thrown aside by the gusts of wind, as if by an invisible force. The entire army stood in horror, trembling and unable to believe what was happening. A thick, black, ominous energy began to ooze out from the deep hole, and then a black wolf emerged from it, oozing terrible black magic. One of the men realized that this was a battle they definitely couldn't win. Before them appeared the huge face of a terrible and evil monster. Shi Wu was thrown to the side by the blow, hitting the ground painfully, and couldn't understand why this was happening. Fenrir, bound by Gleipnir, was limited, but still remained a demonic wolf that brought about the end of the world. The god of divine carnage that had even swallowed up the god himself was Fenrir, and with the boy's current strength, it was impossible to attack him. But it still seemed strange. Charon ordered her warriors to retreat and take Mr. Shi Wu with them, and the guy himself thought that this was similar to that situation in the dungeon with the black troll. Perhaps the girl also saved the team members in the last raid, because no matter how hard they tried, it was impossible to defeat Fenrir, and he did not understand why. But suddenly the guy's eyes widened, as if something important had dawned on him. He finally understood, and he found it hard to believe that he had only just realized it now. He called himself a fool and admitted that it all made no sense to begin with, while the warrior next to him asked if he could move. But Shi Wu, despite the severe pain and terrible fatigue, broke free from the hands of his comrades and went straight to the monster. At this time, Charon fought with all her might, swinging her sword in all directions. Sweat was streaming down her face. She was very exhausted and could barely stand on her feet. But suddenly, she noticed that Shi Wu had come very close to the monster, and she was very surprised. The guy noticed that the monster, as expected, did not attack him, but only looked at him attentively. Charon was afraid for her comrade and screamed, asking what he was doing. She thought he had gone crazy and begged him to come back quickly. Shi Wu stood right in front of the monster's huge face, and it only growled without attacking, which seemed pointless. He didn't know what the S-class hunters would do, but with their current group, attacking the monster was stupid and pointless from the start. That's why everything that was happening seemed so strange, and Shi Wu asked the wolf why he didn't die. He asked how everyone managed to return alive. The guy asked in surprise why none of them had died yet. Charon was amazed and asked him herself what he meant. Then the guy explained that if Fenrir had wanted to, he would have killed them all long ago, and no one would have been able to return alive. All the soldiers were in shock and could not understand how they had survived. Shi Wu said that it was the wolf that let them go, and that was the reason why Charon and her team were able to return. Fenrir told them to run away because he didn't want to hurt people. Of course, it was hard to believe even for Shi Wu himself, but if you think about it, Fenrir never attacked first. If he were a simple monster, this would not make sense, although Fenrir once destroyed Asgard. From birth, he was alone, abandoned by everyone, and struggled with hunger alone, but stubbornly survived. Then rumors began to spread that Fenrir was alive, and the gods of Asgard came to him after hearing of his power. Then he did not resist the unexpected offer of the gods, because for a lone wolf, it was like an invitation to play. They encouraged him by tying him with a rope, and he was able to untangle it, surprising everyone, because even Thor could not break it. Fenrir was happy because he thought he had made friends with the gods, but they thought quite differently. The gods feared the power that could lead to the destruction of the world, so they created Gleipnir to bind it forever, and came to him again. The wolf sensed something was wrong and began to suspect a trick, realizing that it was a trap. One of the gods said that if they didn't let him go, he would be able to bite off his left hand, and then he would be free. A god named Tyr came to him personally and swore an oath, and the wolf believed him because only Tyr did not turn away from him. He brought him food on the barren land where nothing grew, because he considered himself his friend. So Fenrir found himself chained and could no longer free himself, and the gods, as expected, did not fulfill their promise. Even Tyr turned away from him and abandoned him, like the others, not keeping his oath. As promised, Tyr thrust his left hand into the mouth of the grown wolf. He admitted that he had deceived Fenrir, but the wolf was still unable to bite his hand. Fenrir didn't want to do this, because deep down, he considered Tyr a friend. However, the gods, still afraid of his power, thrust a sword into his mouth and forced him to keep his mouth open. Fenrir was to remain chained until Ragnarok. He remained alone and lived in endless pain until madness consumed him. When Ragnarok came, Fenrir was overcome with madness and tore the gods apart, devouring the world. And yet even then, he could not kill Tyr. Even when he was mad, he remembered him and kept the memory of his friend. Tyr was the only one who ever returned to him, abandoned by everyone. He was the friend who once satisfied the hunger of an abandoned creature. Fenrir always considered Tyr his friend, even if it seemed naive and stupid. In myths, Fenrir was not a wolf at all, worthy only of being called a wild demon. Shi Wu explained to his comrades that the monster actually did not want to harm them. All the warriors were stunned and couldn't believe that Shi Wu actually wanted them to trust his words. Charon interrupted their doubts and firmly said that the wolf still needed to be destroyed. Otherwise, it would be a threat. If you neglect an S-rank dungeon and allow it to break through, there will definitely be no turning back. Even if the dungeon doesn't collapse, the wolf will still come out during the breakthrough, and then no one can guarantee that people won't get hurt. Now they must retreat, report to the association, and get help from the strongest S-rank hunters. The girl herself decided to abandon the task of clearing this dangerous dungeon. Shi Wu understood that Charon was right, because in order to prevent a catastrophe, they had to kill Fenrir. He himself could not understand why this powerful wolf was here. Could it really be that Fenrir was abandoned again, as he was in the myths? In mythology, the end of the world was called Ragnarok, and when Gleipnir's chain was broken, Fenrir was able to escape. But for unknown reasons, he found himself tied up again, as if he had been left alone in this place again. The dungeon served as a barrier to trap Fenrir and prevent him from escaping anywhere else. Like the myths, he was abandoned at birth to die a lonely death here. This also explained why the dungeon was considered S-rank, since mana was measured not by the wolf's strength, but by the barrier's magic. The power that trapped the weakened Fenrir was rated as S-rank. Charon interrupted the guy's thoughts and firmly said that it was time for them to go back. There was nothing to be done, because Shi Wu didn't have enough strength, and if they left, everything would be over. Fenrir had no intention of harming the humans, and even if he committed suicide after they left, he would not pursue them. And it all seems stupid because, just like in the myths, everything would end as soon as they left the dungeon. Even if he's Fenrir, he won't be able to stand against a squad of S-rank hunters, so all that's needed is to gather them and clear the place. If the wolf is weakened and tied up, as it is now, then it will be possible to attack him, and this will be enough for victory. Why leave Fenrir alive if he is a threat that needs to be eliminated? Even if leaving now seems like the solution, all that remains for Shi Wu is to return to his normal life and not interfere anymore. He could be making gear and making his own videos for YouTube, spend more time with my sister, earn money and study GodTub to find a way to heal Soa. That's all the guy can do in his current situation. But why is it that right now he is unable to take even these simple steps? Shi Wu suddenly turned around and the commander asked him what he was going to do. The boy rushed towards the wolf and stopped right in front of him. He noticed the beast's bleeding paw and remembered that this wolf had once been abandoned. Fenrir never sought to cause harm, even if he himself risked harm. Yet he remained a dungeon monster and a demonic beast that threatened people, so he could not be left alive. The legends of God Tuba taught that heroes never give up under any circumstances. They fought even in those battles where victory seemed impossible. After all, it was they who overcame the impossible and became true heroes. Shi Wu declared that if there was no way out, he would destroy this dungeon and create a new one. They shouted at him that to destroy the dungeon meant to destroy the space itself, and that only God could do that. Shi Wu knew that awakening such a power was incredibly dangerous, but he couldn't stop. He reflected that the river does not drink its own water, and the trees do not eat their own fruit. The sun does not shine only for itself, and flowers do not smell fragrant only for themselves. Therefore, a gentleman should not live only for his own benefit. He spoke like a scientist, although he knew that no one would recognize it and he would not be able to make money from it. But if you don't get angry even when others reject you, isn't that the behavior of a gentleman? A true gentleman does not get angry, even if the world does not accept him. And in the modern world, it is enough that he is at least not considered an idiot. And yet, for some reason, he just wanted to be a decent person. Not those who are good in themselves, but those who treat other people well. This thought suddenly came to Shi Wu after watching a video about Confucius. He looked at the wounded Fenrir, and this very thought flashed in his heart. So he decided to use the divine martial arts of Hercules. The wolf's eyes widened. He immediately recognized this power. Hercules said that divine martial arts are used not only for creating equipment, because space is the main law of the world. The first stage of this truly divine power was a technique that opened the way to incredible mastery. Shi Wu gathered every last drop of his inner strength and resolutely raised his leg for a powerful kick. His eyes blazed with a bright blue flame, and now it was completely impossible to stop the warrior who had decided to do this. He unleashed a majestic downward dragon strike, directing all his power straight into the ground. This blow raised a huge hurricane of unprecedented strength, which quickly swept through the entire forest. Following this, an incredibly bright beam of light appeared, which completely blinded everyone nearby. The firmament began to crack and break with a roar right above their heads, as if reality itself was splitting apart. Soon, the heavens split completely, and a terrifying and majestic hole in the sky opened up before them. Charon watched what was happening in complete amazement and could not understand how such a phenomenon was even possible. She looked down and saw that Shi Wu was lying unconscious. The girl ran over to check his breathing and pulse, and fortunately, he was still alive. Multicolored shining rays appeared in the sky, mesmerizing in their appearance. And at that moment, the wolf appeared right in front of them. Charon knew that Shi Wu was an unusual awakened without traits, because she realized this during the fight with the troll. She still couldn't understand what kind of terrifying force it was that had destroyed an entire dungeon. But now was not the time for surprise. So she lifted the guy onto her shoulder and headed for the exit. Turning around, she met the gaze of the wolf's huge and surprised eyes. They had to manage to get out before the dungeon completely collapsed. Shi Wu opened his eyes abruptly, breathing heavily, and could not believe that he had woken up. He realized with surprise that despite everything that had happened, he was still alive. The guy got out of bed and realized that he was in the VIP ward of the SH Group hospital. Charon was sitting next to him on the next bed and was inquiring about Leon's condition. Shi Wu asked her in confusion what she was doing there, and the girl explained that she was also a patient. She asked him if he was uncomfortable, but he silently thought that anyone would be pleased to sit next to a beautiful woman. He remembered the old saying of Confucius, that men and women should not sleep together after the age of 7. The boy didn't understand why men and women couldn't be in the same space after the age of 7. But then he stopped and realized what nonsense he was talking. And the girl was surprised why he wasn't interested in what had happened. Shi Wu said that before the dungeon collapsed, Charon pulled him out after he lost consciousness. He also noted that after various procedures, everything started, and wondered if he was right. Charon sat silently and looked very surprised by his words. Shi Wu didn't understand because it seemed like the girl preferred to get straight to the point. She nevertheless confirmed that his words were true and reported that the dungeon had been destroyed and considered cleared, which made her happy. Shi Wu asked what happened to Fenrir, and Charon replied that she did not know his exact location. She added that if we are talking about a wolf monster, then she saw how it headed somewhere into the distance. Since the dungeon that served as the wolf's prison was destroyed, the boy hoped that he would return to the kingdom of the gods. Charon said that she had not yet revealed the truth about the dungeon and asked her comrades to remain silent, but it was officially stated that they were the ones who conquered it. However, she added that if Shi Wu wanted to fix things, they could make it so that everyone knew who cleared the dungeon. But the guy said that it would be better to announce that Miss Charon did it, and the girl asked if there was a reason why he was hiding his power. Shi Wu was surprised and said that he was not hiding his power at all. Otherwise, he would not have created a channel on YouTube. Although he had no intention of hiding his strength, given the current situation, he acted differently. Right now, it's important to him that the SH Group gets credit for clearing the ES rank dungeon, so it's best to attribute it to Charon. The guy thought that she must doubt her abilities, and wondered whether it was possible to announce this openly or not. Even though she didn't have the skills to clear an S-rank dungeon, the guy said that this dungeon was special and she could handle it. Charon asked with a touch of irony if he was trying to console her, but the guy replied that he was simply stating the facts. After these words, they both fell silent and looked at each other in silence for a while. Then Charon smiled and thanked her partner for his support. Shi Wu said that it was time to stop there and asked the girl if that was all she wanted to say, but Charon replied that not everything, and then asked if he would like to work with her. After some time left alone in the ward, the guy took out his phone and was shocked by what he saw. Notifications poured onto his screen one after another, informing him that he had increased his insight, super strength, divine martial arts, and gentleman's wisdom. Usually, superpowers only increase by tiny percentages daily, but this time, they increased by 13%. The divine martial arts mastery, which had only risen by 0.1% in a week, increased by 9.3%. Moreover, the gentleman's skill and insight and wisdom grew by several years at once. The guy realized that this happened because of the dragon's downward strike, because before, he only showed dungeon clearing in his videos. But this time, he destroyed the very space and dimension of the dungeon, causing it to finally collapse. He found himself unconscious again, just like when he encountered the dark troll and used the force. But now, compared to the past, the ability to use divine martial arts was a huge step forward. The boy wondered when he would be able to finally make this power his own. And now he wanted to try, just once. And who would have thought that Charon would immediately agree to his proposal? The next day, the girl got into the car and asked to be taken to her grandfather. The driver thanked her for her hard work on the raid, and the group representative was also pleased. The driver then asked Shi Wu what his response was to her proposal. When he heard that the guy refused, he was surprised. And he asked again what he said this time. Charon replied that he had said something along the lines of gentlemen getting along with people, not groups. The guy noted that insignificant people create gangs. But even within them, they don't know how to get along with each other. So he said that instead of being colleagues, he sometimes likes to just work together. Based on this, he also asked if the girl would like to learn the art of fencing. The driver was surprised that Shi Wu was really going to teach the girl, although he acknowledged his exceptional abilities, since formally he was an awakened D class. Yet he was going to teach the young lady Charon the ES class, and the girl replied that she would like to try to learn. The driver then asked why they were going to the chairman, and Charon explained that she needed to pay for her training. As the evening progressed, the sun gradually disappeared behind the horizon, and a quiet and calm atmosphere reigned near the hospital. Shi Wu, sitting on the street, looked at his phone and wondered which of the masters was better. He recalled the Heaven Destroyer, the owner of the divine Sword King Xiang Yu. He then introduced a dragon slayer who wielded the Siegfried sword technique, capable of slaying monsters. And finally, he thought about the founder of the Wudong sect, the Taiji swordmaster Zhang Sanfeng. The guy believed that these three techniques were the most suitable for Charon. He believed that among these three techniques, there would be one that the girl would like the most. So he wanted to show her all the techniques and let her choose the one that was closest to her. To do this, you will first need to pay for a subscription, but this is not so important because he will also receive a monthly tuition fee. Shi Wu decided to check the subscription price, and the required icon appeared on his phone screen. At first, he saw the figure of 200 million and was surprised that it was so little. But when I looked closer, I realized that it said 2 billion. And I couldn't believe why it was so expensive. After all, the Confucius channel cost 1 billion, and this one turned out to be even more expensive, which seemed incredible. He was shocked because the last time the price was only 100 million, and now it had risen to 2 billion. The guy wondered if this meant that the subscription price increased depending on the number of channels connected. If this is true, then in the future, the amount could reach 3 billion, 4, 5, or even higher, which is completely absurd. And if the price went up by at least another billion, the total would be 9 billion. And he didn't know if he could cancel the subscription. This meant that he would have to pay 9 billion monthly, otherwise the subscription would be canceled automatically. Even if he chooses only one sword technique, the subscription to the next channel will also increase, all because the subscriptions to different channels are added together and become a total amount. And no matter how much money he earned, there was no end in sight to this growth. And Shi Wu sat in complete despair. Suddenly he felt someone's energy and presence, which made him turn around sharply. He realized that this energy definitely did not belong to a human. The guy got up from the bench and began to look in surprise at who was there, and noticed a dog. But an unexpected detail immediately put everything into place. The dog happily wagged its fluffy tail, the tip of which was green. This small black puppy with green markings turned out to be Fenrir. Shi Wu was surprised when he realized who was standing in front of him, and he couldn't figure out where exactly he came from. And yet he still didn't fully believe that it was really Fenrir, because now he seemed much smaller. Suddenly, he noticed how the little wolf cub spun sharply in the air, and then the puppy dumped the caught mouse in front of the guy. Shi Wu was surprised and wondered if the puppy really wanted him to eat it. But as soon as he reached out his hand to the mouse, he noticed that it was still alive. After this, the puppy suddenly ran off to the side, and the guy did not understand where it had gone. A confused expression appeared on Shi Wu's face, as he didn't understand what kind of strange silk was in front of him. Hercules was furious, because didn't he teach the boy how to defeat the monster? Shi Wu said he was asking because he didn't know, but Hercules insisted that he was already teaching him how to defeat Fenrir. However, advice that his weak point was his side or tail did not help, and none of them worked. Hercules said that it was all because the guy was too weak, and that should have been acknowledged from the very beginning. Shi Wu should have warned him, because he almost died, and Hercules didn't think that his student would be so weak. The guy said that it didn't matter anymore, and asked the man to tell him a strategy that was appropriate for his level. Hercules said that it was unfair because he could not do that, and even his strength did not allow it. What a blessing that everything worked out, because otherwise he really could have died. More importantly, his video from the dungeon was erased, and both the wolf and Charon were in the video. This video would have definitely gotten at least 1 million views, but now it's gone forever. Shi Wu heard a sound from the side and realized that the puppy had returned. He noticed that he was trembling all over and whining pitifully, and then he stood next to Hercules and again said that all this was unfair. Then the man stopped crying and suddenly turned around in surprise. Shi Wu started to get out of bed and suddenly remembered something. Hercules had fought Fenrir before, so the puppy should have remembered the man. Now there was a dove lying in front of him, and he didn't understand what it meant. Shi Wu touched the bird with his hand and told it to stand up. The dove jumped up in fright, and its eyes became round. He began to walk from side to side and toss his head. Shi Wu didn't understand what all this meant and just looked at him in surprise. Then the bird spread its wings and flew out the open window. And Hercules asked where Fenrir was from and what the dove was for. Shi Wu replied that he didn't know. Perhaps the puppy just brought it to him to eat. But Hercules didn't understand why, because Fenrir wasn't even a cat. And in any case, if a puppy brings him animals, doesn't that mean they're his prey? The guy said he thought the puppy didn't want to hurt other animals. Hercules asked why he was bringing them to the guy then, as if he was asking him to kill him. And where did the animal come from here anyway? Why does the puppy bring animals? After this, Shi Wu told Hercules about everything that happened in the dungeon. The man was surprised because the puppy appeared in his dimension, and he did not understand how it could exist there. Shi Wu said that he was also wondering if Hercules was the only one who didn't know how to get here. The man said that all this was nonsense because their dimensions cannot intersect. But then how could Fenrir be here? The boy realized that Hercules was indeed the only one who didn't know how to get into this world. Hercules began to ask for trust and showed his muscles, but this again seemed unfair. In any case, the guy managed to survive the dragon's downward strike, and that was amazing. Shi Wu smiled and said that he was just lucky at that moment. Hercules was surprised because the dragon's downward strike could not be used by relying only on luck. The boy asked why not teach him the next technique, and Hercules said it was easy. But shouldn't a student give something in return? And Shi Wu realized that he would give away the content of the next video. Hercules was delighted because everything turned out as he expected from his student. At this time, in another building, where the lights were turned off, there were empty staircases. A wealthy man sat on a chair among the women and was informed of a new order for the D-class hunter, Shi Wu. The man rudely put the glass on the table and ordered the girls to leave, leaving him alone with the guest. They did so immediately and left silently. The man, hearing the hunter's level, only chuckled and smiled. A silent man in a mask stood in front of him, and the rich man thought that he was being mocked. Did their organization Pandemonium really seem like a joke to him, since this man was a top executive named Jig Wang? But the man in the mask said that this guy was no ordinary hunter. Jig Wang heard about Sharon clearing a high-ranking dungeon, and the internet was buzzing about it. But Shi Wu was also connected to this, although the details remained unknown. Shi Wu was helping Charon that day, and it was necessary to confirm him through the company by any means. And more importantly, it was a VIP order, but Jig Wang said they couldn't fulfill it. After all, Li Minzhong had already made her move, and the masked man wondered if it was the butcher from the inspection bureau. Jig Wang said he didn't understand what had come over her, but she was already causing them a lot of problems. If this guy is caught by this woman, even he won't be able to escape unharmed. And a new head of the Korea branch was recently appointed. He didn't want to create unnecessary difficulties right after his appointment. The masked man was shocked to hear about the new leader and wondered if he was really on Scar's level. The key figures of Pandemonium are called leaders and are divided into 5 levels. These are the levels of tear, fracture, crack, scar, and bruise. The leader of the organization, whose identity is hidden, is said to have killed one of the 13 heroes.
A scar-level leader can be one who manages to survive the battle with the red shadow with only scars. There is probably a scar-level manager working there now, but you can't tell anyone about it. Jig Wang opened a new bottle of whiskey and poured himself a glass. While his guest watched, he drank the whole thing down in one gulp. Then they told him that they would help him with the inspection bureau, and at the same time, they will give us a chance to gain a foothold in Korea. This was not just a VIP order, but a super VIP one. And the masked man said that Shi Wu couldn't be killed, but his limbs could be cut off. Shi Wu, looking at his phone, couldn't believe it, because if you deal with a sick person, progress slows down a lot. But it still happens. At least the numbers are increasing, and although something around it won't fall tomorrow, progress is still being made. The boy noticed an unconscious rabbit next to him, which lay motionless and looked very weak. Shi Wu turned around to look for Fenrir, but he still couldn't figure out where he was. He became curious about where he could find a rabbit in such a big city and how this was possible. Several days have passed since then, and the puppy will probably soon calm down and stop bothering everyone around him. The next day, he brought the boy a deer. And this surprised Shi Wu even more with its unexpectedness. Another day later, an eagle appeared at his feet, who also looked strangely calm and obedient. Shi Wu was surprised and wondered what would happen next time, and how he even caught these animals. The next day, the guy left his room tired, feeling tired after all the events of the last few days. But there was a bear lying behind the door, which surprised him greatly and made him freeze in place. There was a puppy standing next to his leg, wagging its tail and looking like it was saying, "I hope you like this." Shi Wu realized that he would now have to take special measures to deal with the situation and protect everyone. A week later, the boy did not return home from the hospital, and this began to cause concern among those around him. His younger sister met him and asked if Shi Wu was feeling well after all the events of the past few days. He replied that he was fine, because the wound was not that serious, and if he had not taken the girl to the hospital in time, she could have died. More importantly, how was So-ah feeling? And he asked if she had been taking her medication regularly, without missing a dose even in his absence. Shi Wu asked if she had taken herbal remedies, as she couldn't skip a dose, but the girl replied that the thought of them made her stomach ache. It seems she's still having a hard time, and her brother will need to improve his divine and healing techniques to help. Shi Wu said he needed to ask his sister something, and asked if she happened to like puppies, which seemed strange. She wondered if he really had brought the puppy. And the boy paused for a moment, considering his words. So-ah had already sat down on the floor, noticing the little puppy, and was surprised at how cute and friendly he was. Shi Wu told her to be careful, but the girl didn't understand why her brother was warning her about the puppy's possible danger. She didn't understand how he could hurt anyone with his teeth, and she didn't know that if he bit, the consequences could be dire. So-ah asked his name, and if Shi Wu didn't give it, she asked permission to name it herself. The girl looked at the puppy and suggested the name Blackie, after which he happily wagged his tail, showing his joy. She turned to her brother and asked if he didn't like the name, to which he replied that it was fine, although she didn't understand the rules. So-ah asked the puppy if he liked his name, and realized that he really liked it and it suited him perfectly. Shi Wu was shocked that Fenrir liked such a name, and wondered how he had already learned how to survive in the human world. The girl happily hugged the puppy, and said that from now on, this would be his permanent name, which he deserved. Shi Wu noticed how happy his sister was now, and couldn't help but smile, enjoying her emotions and reaction to the puppy. He decided that perhaps the fact that she had given the puppy a good name was not so bad, and brought joy to everyone. The next day, in the apartment where the Hunters Guild was located on the ground floor, Cherin and Shi Wu met to discuss business. The girl said that first they needed to sign a contract, as she had promised, minus the deposit, which amounted to 9 billion. Shi Wu checked his message to make sure everything had arrived, and confirmed that the balance had increased correctly and without errors. He did not show joy, but in fact he was very pleased, because he had 10,600 million in his account, on which a family of 4 could live for 277 years. Sharon said that if it wasn't too much trouble, they could discuss the price of the lecture he mentioned after she saw his swordsmanship. Shi Wu replied that yes, please, and that she should see it in person and decide on its price, since the guy was not sure. He himself did not know how much to ask for the lecture and how much she was willing to pay, so it was better for her to make the decision on her own. So he asked the girl to borrow one training sword to demonstrate the technique and skills of wielding it. Now they were standing in the middle of the gym, and the guy explained that out of all the sword techniques, he would show her only 3 that were suitable specifically for her. He explained that he had been looking for techniques that would work best for her,
but it had been difficult for him to choose just one from all the possible options. The girl simply had to say which technology she liked the most, since joining the membership program was too expensive. The longer you're in the program, the more you have to pay. And the guy only came to watch the trailer and see if he could show off his technique. The first sword style he would show her was called the Heaven-Cutting Divine Sword, and it required concentration and strength. Sharon watched the movements carefully, but realized that she couldn't see even a second of the sword's actual movement. It moved so quickly. Shi Wu stood in front of her and masterfully swung his sword, demonstrating techniques with high precision and dexterity. Suddenly, with one blow, he touched the floor, and powerful magical energy spread throughout the room, affecting the atmosphere. Charon couldn't move, unlike last time, because the guy swung his sword rather slowly, but the pressure was acting on her body. Shi Wu said that he would now show her the Dragon Slayer sword style, which was even more impressive and powerful. He gripped his sword tightly and swung it masterfully, cutting through the air incredibly quickly and effectively, creating a magical effect. After this, the spirit of a pink dragon burst out of his sword, flew very close to the girl, and suddenly stopped. Shi Wu said that at the end, he would show the sword style Taeguk, raising a huge whirlwind and wind force around himself. Charon stood there in amazement, watching as a powerful wind rose around him, engulfing the entire gym. The boy swung his sword, and a yin-yang sign appeared under his feet, symbolizing the harmony and power of magical energies. After this, beams of fire and water appeared in the air, intertwining and creating an impressive spectacle. These elements then mixed and transformed into a dark, mysterious force, creating a sense of unusual danger. Charon stood and silently watched everything that was happening, trembling from the impressions and strength emanating from the guy. Shi Wu said that was all, and these 3 sword techniques were the ones he could teach the girl, asking which one she liked the most. At the same time, a black car was parked opposite the Hunters Guild headquarters, from which they were watching what was happening. The men discussed how someone had not yet left, and no one could confirm that they had actually left the building or what they had been doing inside. Jigwan said that he was helping, and that Shi Wu offered his services to Che-Ren. He looks menacing at first glance, but in bed, he behaves differently. After that, he remained silent, and his partner asked if they should continue to wait to see how it all ended. Jigwang remembered about Shi Wu, and that he had a younger sister, which could affect the situation and their plans. He said that if they contacted outsiders, problems could arise, because the inspection bureau could find out everything and interfere. The man replied that there was no need to worry, as the people behind the council would figure it out themselves, and a few moments of attention to the younger sister would not hurt anything. After all, instead, they will waste their time, and the guy himself will come to them on his knees, noticing everything that is happening. Therefore, the man said that they should quickly catch Shi Wu's younger sister to use it for their own purposes. Charon continued to stand there in shock, and the guy called her name several times until she finally came to her senses and could concentrate. And when this finally happened, he asked her with interest which technique of those she had seen she liked the most and found the most powerful. The girl looked away shyly and could not make up her mind because she did not know what exactly to answer to this direct question. Shi Wu handed her the Janisha and told her that if she was unable to choose the right technique, she should try everything herself. Charon swung her sword, closed her eyes tightly, and took a deep breath, as if gathering courage for the upcoming blow. And after that, she waved the weapon in different directions several times, trying to repeat as accurately as possible the attack she had recently seen. Shi Wu watched her actions and realized that the girl's movements were no different from his own, but there was clearly something missing in them. The girl stopped to catch her breath and wondered if she was really missing something important and not noticing a necessary detail. Shi Wu suggested that she try other techniques as well, since he simply had to get his allowance and therefore would try his best. Sometime later in the evening, the guy was riding on the bus, and Hercules said that his girlfriend couldn't keep up with him because it's hard for an ordinary person to compare with their strength. Shi Wu replied that he had done it himself, and that together, with the help of Hercules, they were mastering powerful divine martial arts. Hercules reminded him that when the boy first asked to teach him these arts, he remembered the reason why he was refused then. Shi Wu said that he remembered it perfectly well, and then Hercules explained that it was not just a matter of laziness, as he had put it then, but something completely different. He remembered that he had said back then that divine martial arts could only be mastered when the boy learned to use his superpower, because his mental state at that moment was at its worst. But now, Hercules meant that just as he was mastering the basics of divine martial arts, the boy was obliged to learn the other arts of the gods. And that is precisely why the girl, not knowing the basic principles, cannot repeat him,
but the very fact that she almost managed to keep up with his movements is also a feat. Hercules remembered that the guy had said that he had no traits, but he was still able to awaken and gain his own strength. The idea that he has no traits is, in itself, a unique trait, as the power of the gods cannot be obtained simply by subscribing to their channels. More precisely, a new existence cannot be overwritten by an existing one, and what the guy calls a trait is a unique manifestation that cannot be replaced or destroyed. However, Shi Wu himself can be compared to a blank slate, as his existence lacks any uniqueness of its own. And that is why he is able to study the traits of other gods without limitation. And isn't that why he has access to GodTube? Since it clearly shows that no one but him can know about all the possibilities of this mysterious application. Heracles said that might be true, but then it would mean he wouldn't be able to train Charon, and his monthly allowance of 10 billion won would disappear. However, he added that if the guy taught her what he had come up with himself, it would not make much difference and would not cause any problems. Meanwhile, the man stood in front of the huge door and couldn't believe that this was really Shi Wu's house, which he managed to get into. Without hesitation, he reached for the door handle and pulled it out of its mountings with ease, as if it were made of paper. Without ceremony, he entered the stranger's apartment and leisurely walked through the rooms, carefully examining every corner. Stopping next to the bed where Soa was sleeping, he felt joy at finally finding her here. Since they still needed to lure Shi Wu out to deal with him, the man decided to have some fun with this girl. But suddenly he heard a strange sound that he had not noticed before, and he wondered if there was really someone else in this house. Turning around, he saw a small dog that suddenly began to glow with a bright green light. At this time, Shi Wu listened to the man's proposal and was greatly surprised by his unexpected words. He explained that although humans could not master divine arts directly, if a guy learned them himself and then taught them to his girlfriend, it would not matter. After all, he still teaches her the arts from GodTube, and the fact that she can't learn directly won't change, and the story will only deviate slightly from the original. Among the masters, he mentioned Zhang Sanfeng, who, with the help of Tai Zhu, became an important figure in the world of martial arts, and even once helped Hercules himself. It is impossible to directly teach the arts of the gods, but a guy can create his own art based on them and then teach it to his girlfriend without any problems. Shi Wu realized that he needed to master Tai Zhu, and only later would he be able to practice divine martial arts. Creating your own martial art is not easy at all, but he was confident that he would succeed because he had already overcome many difficulties. In any case, he thanked the man for telling him all this and guiding him on the right path. Hercules said that if he really wanted to thank him, he should give him the video he mentioned earlier. Shi Wu replied that he would take care of it and let you know as soon as it was ready, as the situation was a bit more complicated now. When the bus stopped, the boy quickly ran out of it, thinking about how difficult it would be to create new art and teach Charon. But when he approached his house, he noticed that the door handle was lying right on the ground, and his heart sank with anxiety. His eyes turned red, wrinkles appeared on his face, and his veins began to bulge with tension. He burst into the house and thought only about his sister being safe and not being in any danger. But when he reached her bed, he calmed down a little and felt relieved. He saw that she was still sleeping peacefully. But suddenly, he heard a strange noise in the room. Turning around, he noticed that the puppy had injured the man, who was now lying unconscious on the floor. The guy couldn't understand why this man came here, but he was sure that his intentions were bad. He took Chernish in his arms, began to stroke him, and asked with gratitude if it was really he who protected Soa. Shi Wu looked closely at the stranger and realized that he had never met this person before, but his energy made it clear that he was an awakened, unusual person. And although it was unclear how he ended up here, his intentions were certainly evil. The boy hugged Chernish tightly, thanked him, and asked him to continue looking after the house when he was not around. The puppy barked confidently, as if agreeing to his owner's request and confirming his readiness to protect. After this, the man's face became distorted with anger, and determination flashed in his eyes. After a while, he began to come to his senses, although his vision was still blurry and unclear. He sat tied up on a chair and could not understand exactly where he was or what had happened. But when he raised his head, he recognized Meng Shi Wu in front of him, and immediately realized that he was in trouble. The guy was surprised that the stranger knew his name, but said that he was going to ask him a few questions. All he could do was answer them truthfully, but the man called him crazy and laughed. Suddenly, the ropes behind his back came undone, because he didn't believe that Shi Wu could hold him by force. Now, Shi Wu finally understood that this man had come to the house with bad intentions, and not at all by chance. He placed his hand on his shoulder, and it glowed with a bright light,
causing the man to scream in pain. Shi Wu covered his mouth with his other hand, which caused him even more surprise. Shi Wu's body was ablaze with magic, and he passively attacked the stranger as he continued to scream. The guy told him to shut up and warned him that if his sister woke up, it would not be limited to just questions. He then used magic and struck the man hard in the stomach. Shi Wu said that he was not the type to take the word of a person who still had all his limbs intact. Meanwhile, night had fallen, and the city streets were almost completely empty. In the midst of this silence stood two bandits with scars, who suddenly turned around in surprise. Shi Wu appeared in front of them, throwing an unconscious man next to him. He looked straight at the bandits and calmly asked them where Meng Shi Wu was. Shi Wu was furious, his eyes glowing red, and the number of bandits around him was growing, ready to fight. The guy repeated his question again and insistently told the bandits to answer honestly where their boss was. The bandits didn't understand what he was talking about, and one of them said that the guy was talking complete nonsense and was just scaring them. One of the men approached Shi Wu, put his hand on his shoulder, and told him to cool down and go home before they took action. He asked if Shi Wu even knew who Meng Shi Wu was, and said that he should get lost if he valued his life. The tension between them grew with each passing second, and the guy repeated his question again, trying to get an answer. The bandit began to get angry. His face and gestures betrayed his readiness to teach the guy a lesson for his insolent behavior. But before he could do anything, Shi Wu grabbed him by the collar and lifted him into the air, asking again where their boss was. The man was in shock and panic, screaming for them to let him go, his teeth clenched in pain and fear. His eyebrows trembled in horror, and he couldn't understand why this guy had such incredible strength. After this, Shi Wu threw the man to the ground with great force, and his whole body hit the floor with a loud thud. All the other bandits stood in complete shock and could not understand what was happening right before their eyes. Everyone grabbed their weapons, not understanding what this guy was doing or whether he even knew who they were. They noticed that he was extremely confident in his skills, but they still decided to show him where he belonged in this situation. Shi Wu raised his foot and kicked the ground with such force that something under his foot shattered into small pieces. Small stones rose from the ground and hung in the air near the boy for a while, like obedient students. Then he punched the air, and the stones flew in all directions, striking the bandits with their destructive effect. The gang leader was in complete shock and could not comprehend the full strength of the stranger, standing paralyzed with fear. Shi Wu approached him with great speed and grabbed his face with his palm, leaving no chance for resistance. After that, he angrily asked the guy standing next to him where Meng Shi Wu was, demanding an answer immediately. At this time, at the Seoul branch of the Hunter Inspection Bureau, the commander was informed that Pandemonium had made his move. Li Minzhong turned around in shock and asked her assistant if she had found out the exact location of the enemy. The assistant replied that no, but noted that the enemy's movements were quite clear and they would soon be able to figure it out. The girl shouted for everyone to immediately gather the members of the 4th Squad and request reinforcements from all possible guards. Moreover, she ordered to gather even those guards who could move, and the assistant said that she understood everything and ran. Li Minzhong realized that she also needed to act, but a man's hand suddenly fell on her shoulder, telling her to stop and apologizing. He explained that an urgent task had been received, and it seemed that the commander really needed help, but the girl replied that she doubted her abilities. When she heard that this was a special order from the leader, Li Minzhong was very surprised and confused. The man said that there was class activity in the Sandu Dan dungeon, and the commander should go there as soon as possible. Li Minzhong asked if she really needed to go there and suggested sending another squad, but the man interrupted her, saying that he had heard her request for reinforcements and that it might be better to decline the request to avoid taking any risks. Moreover, he said that the head would not turn a blind eye to this, and he would not be able to bear responsibility for the consequences of her choice, so she needed to be prepared. The girl was shocked that he was so rude, because he became the head of the department and the Inspection Bureau of Hunters, and still threatened to fire her. Although the man called her, she left, telling them to do what they wanted and did not expect any further orders. At this time, a huge gang of bandits gathered near Shi Wu, deciding to kill the guy and show the strength of their group. Shi Wu noticed that there were about 100 awakened among them, and judging by their unusual appearance, it would be a difficult battle. But he was ready to protect his sister. If he let them get away with it, they would come back and target her again, so he couldn't let that happen. He must destroy them by acting with the morning darkness in his heart, by morally and instinctively making them afraid rather than by reasoning with them. He must instill in the bandits that they should never cross his path, so that they scream in terror at the mere mention of his name. At that moment, a bandit rushed towards him, shouting and asking if Shi Wu even knew who they were and what to expect. Both of them raised their fists and met each other with blows in a tense fight, full of determination and strength. But Shi Wu turned out to be stronger, and the bandit, having received a powerful blow, flew to the side without having time to do anything. All the other bandits realized that he was far from an ordinary guy, and that a hasty attack would be dangerous for them. Shi Wu thought that when fighting against multiple opponents who attack 3 or at most 5 at a time, attacking a large group would lead to chaos. Dozens of men forming a huge formation, attacking in unison and exchanging tactical information, demonstrated the art of formation, albeit crookedly. Of course, it was absurd to call it art, but they imitated it to some extent, like criminals fighting people instead of monsters. Chinese heroes claimed that the key to breaking the art of construction is simple: 2 lives and 2 deaths. And first, you need to learn to separate them. There are different types of construction art, but they all follow the principle. In the center, there are 64 heavenly charges and 12 arrays of earthly charges. Even trying to remember, the guy didn't understand all the details, but he vaguely saw what was happening and assessed the tactical picture. There was a small space between the bandits where a high-level illumination occurred, as if someone was talking to him directly. This space resembled a huge door of life, through which one could see the essence of what was happening and understand the strategy. Suddenly, when everyone gathered together, there was a huge collision, as if a powerful explosion of energy had occurred. All the bandits were shocked and couldn't understand how this was even possible in real time, watching the guy's actions. Shi Wu stood there, sweaty and tense, with magic shining around him, enhancing his presence and the fear of his enemy. The human body has several vital points, such as Renmai, Yuan Shui, and Shaohuang, where the Qi acupuncture center is located. Shi Wu grabbed the small energy beam and began to strike his opponents with it, piercing their bodies and paralyzing them. Death's door was everywhere, but nowhere could he see the 2 lives needed to apply the power accurately. The bandits crowded around him, shouting and declaring that they had finally caught him like a rat. But Shi Wu was prepared for anything. No matter how experienced he is, fighting hundreds of people at once is always extremely difficult and requires full concentration and strength. Hercules said earlier that no one can stand against a group because the battle immediately becomes difficult, even if there are many small fry around. And then you need to act decisively, breaking through with your strength and destroying the enemy's formation, not giving him the opportunity to coordinate. All the bandits were shaking with fear. Some were coughing and couldn't believe what was happening, and some had already started running, realizing the guy's strength. Shi Wu used the strength of Hercules to advance and kill one after another, and one of the bandits called him a monster. As the boy destroyed each opponent in turn, the strongest of them would appear at the end, ready to challenge him. At that moment, Meng Shi Wu appeared and asked what was going on and why there was noise and destruction among his people. His eyes widened in surprise, and he couldn't figure out who this guy was who was literally demolishing his entire team. Hercules had previously told Shi Wu that as soon as he saw the team leader, he should kill him immediately without delay. As soon as Meng Shi Wu turned around, he saw the guy flying straight towards him, ready to strike. He didn't have time to react and received a powerful blow to the face, which knocked him off his feet instantly. After that, he was thrown to the side with great speed, as if he had been thrown out of the battle scene by a powerful force. Hercules reminded the boy that when meeting the team leader, he must eliminate him immediately to prevent further threats. The man lay near the wall he had hit, and it now bore a noticeable dent from the collision. All his partners were in complete shock, not understanding how this could have happened to their boss at the most unexpected moment. He was knocked out with one punch, and no one could believe that this was even possible in a real fight. Shi Wu continued to glare at him, his gaze filled with anger and unwavering determination. A few seconds later, Jig Wang came to and coughed loudly, trying to recover from the strong blow. After that, he struggled to his feet, leaning against the wall, and the bandits were glad that their leader had survived. He then looked menacingly at his opponent, trying to assess his strength and intentions in the fight. At first glance, he didn't seem particularly strong, but upon closer inspection, it became clear that this was just an illusion. If the attack had really happened suddenly, Jig Wang might have died without even having time to resist. He spat out blood and with difficulty asked the guy what he wanted from him and why he intervened. Shi Wu asked the man if it was he who ordered the kidnapping of his sister, demanding an honest answer. Jig Wang realized that Meng Shi Wu was standing in front of him, and when the boy repeated the question, he nodded, confirming the truth. He looked at him and realized that this was the very face he had seen on the website. Although the customer indicated that he only had a D rank, Shi Wu's eyes began to burn with a bright fire, and he asked one last time who ordered the kidnapping of his sister, not hiding his anger. Jig Wang smiled and asked what would happen if it was true, knowing that his level was higher than stated, but not by much. Shi Wu instantly took off, leaving a trail of blue light behind him, demonstrating his speed and strength. In just a couple of seconds, he found himself in front of his opponent, ready to deliver the decisive blow. However, Jig Wang managed to stop the attack. Noting the boy's amazing speed of movement, the man strained all his senses, but still almost missed the blow, fearing for his life. Although this guy wasn't perfect, that was where his strength ended, and he couldn't do anything else to counter it for now. From what the man saw, he concluded that the boy's strength seemed to be connected with will and internal energy. At this moment, Jig Wang began to grow in size, using his physical enhancement state to counter him. This meant that the stronger he became, the weaker his opponent seemed, and he tried to throw Shi Wu to the ground. Shi Wu jumped up from the ground and pushed himself to the side to avoid falling and maintain control of the fight. His eyes continued to burn with anger, and he wiped his wounded cheek, preparing for the next attack. Jig Wang cursed at the guy, and a visible mark remained on his stomach from the blow that almost knocked him to the ground. However, Shi Wu managed to strike back, something that an ordinary person of his rank would never be capable of. Jig Wang stated that the enemy had already done enough, and it is time to open our eyes and understand the reality of the situation. All of Jig Wang's partners were in complete shock at what was happening, not believing their eyes. Jig Wang pointed his finger at the boy and declared that he was now accepted into the Pandemonium team, confirming his level. Jig Wang's subordinate tried to say something, but he was told to shut his mouth and stop interfering in the conversation. His friends stood nearby, and they fell silent, realizing that interference would be dangerous for both of them. Jig Wang told the boy that he had power, and there was no point in living an ordinary and boring life, because there was a huge difference between them and ordinary people. He argued that it was fair for the strong to live by their own laws, while the weak should follow the rules they created for their own safety. For super beings like them, there is no point in sacrificing themselves for the weak, because they are the ones who should rule the world. Shouldn't the weak sacrifice for the strong, since they themselves are superhuman and have the right to power? A strong person must oppress a weak one, because it is the strong who are able to control everything and achieve what they want. Jig Wang shouted that they would create a world where strength determines power and justice, where there are no rules and laws, and everyone can do as they want. Shi Wu didn't understand the meaning of his words and didn't really listen, but he noticed that the man needed to speak out. He asked Jig Wang if he was done talking nonsense, demanding concrete actions rather than empty words. Jig Wang asked if it was all because of his sister that the boy was experiencing such strong emotions and was ready to fight. Shi Wu remained angry, not understanding why Jig Wang thought this was stupid and not worthy of attention. Jig Wang replied that if a person is controlled by personal attachment, then he is weak, but the boy did not agree with this statement. This meant that he was a man, not an animal like Jig Wang, capable of acting only on instinct. The man shouted that he admired his abilities and was ready to give him a chance, but if the guy was ready to sacrifice his life, let him do it. His body began to grow even larger in size, and the chain around his neck broke as he looked at the boy, not sparing his words. He knew Jig Wang was invincible, but he was ready to fight when his opponent raised his huge fist up. With great speed, Jig Wang began to strike the guy with both hands in turn, trying to defeat the guy. But after a few blows, he stopped and looked in surprise, not understanding what had happened. It occurred to him that he had been pushed back by the boy's strength, and this made him wonder about the strength of his opponent. He couldn't understand what it was, and at what moment it happened when Shi Wu was already next to him. Jig Wang tried to strike again, but the boy dodged twice, demonstrating incredible reflexes and speed. After this, he received another powerful blow to the stomach, which shook him and knocked him down. Jig Wang gathered his strength and tried to strike again, but missed, amazed by the enemy's incredible speed. He was in complete shock and could not believe that this was even possible in battle because it seemed unreal. A moment later, he screamed in pain as he received a blow to the side, realizing that the opponent was on a completely different level. He realized that in front of him was a completely different level of power, completely different from what he had seen before. Unable to bear it, Jig Wang fell to the ground with a loud thud, feeling the full force of the guy on himself. He pointed his finger at the enemy and said that he would not give up and would not leave everything so easy, despite what had happened. Shi Wu replied emotionlessly that if Jig Wang wanted to continue, he had to take a risk, Otherwise, he would destroy all of Pandemonium. The man was shocked, not believing that Shi Wu was going to fight the huge Pandemonium team alone. Shi Wu only told him to take a closer look to assess the entire situation and the enemy's strength. A blue power began to rise from the ground around him, enveloping him and displaying incredible power. The bandits who watched this were overcome with fear and could not believe what was happening. Shi Wu concentrated all his strength into his legs and jumped up, raising one leg for a crushing blow. Jigwang looked up at it helplessly and realized that this was a superpower that was beyond the reach of an ordinary person. He recognized that before him was the divine art of Hercules, and this was the first form known only to the chosen ones. Shi Wu used the falling dragon strike technique, demonstrating the full power of his combat prowess. A few minutes later, Li Minzhong arrived at the scene of the recent violent fight, and everyone present greeted their commander, and she demanded to know the current situation. One man replied that it was all over, adding that it was easier to see everything with your own eyes than to try to explain it in words. There were bandits lying unconscious on the ground everywhere, and, according to eyewitnesses, when they arrived, the whole picture looked exactly like that. The man explained that not everyone was unconscious. Some had already begun to come to, and the commander ordered to first find out who these people were. She said that even those who are still unconscious need to be checked, because as soon as they wake up, their past needs to be verified. Li Minzhong clarified that everyone should be checked for convictions for murder, rape, and brutal beatings. The girl emphasized that if someone has a criminal past, then that person should be killed on the spot, without hesitation. The man confirmed that he understood the order, and Li Minzhong turned to Sua and added that she would also assist him in this matter. After these words, the commander approached the leader of the bandits and looked at him silently for a while, without saying a word. She recognized him because it was Meng Shi Wu, one of the most powerful leaders of the criminal organization Pandemonium. Even if the entire 4th detachment of guards had attacked him at the same time, it was unlikely that they would have been able to win, and even she would not have succeeded. She wondered who could have brought him to such a state, because it seemed impossible. Not far from the battlefield, Shi Wu sat on the floor, despite the intense pain, injecting needles into his arm. He used a divine skill called divine healing, and his proficiency with this technique had increased significantly. After the procedure, he felt a little better, but he still didn't understand when the excruciating pain would completely go away. There were skills that couldn't be used on people, and that was why he didn't use his full strength like he had in Fenrir's dungeon. He clearly understood that if he had used all his power, the outcome could have been extremely tragic and irreparable. However, the boy gradually learned to control his magic, and the power of Hercules' magic and divine sword increased. This duel was not only a battle of magic, but also strengthened his other characteristics, although there was still a lot of work ahead. His recent opponent was truly strong, and compared to him, Kang Do-chul was no threat at all. There was currently a war going on between the guards and the criminal rankers, and at any moment, he could again find himself in the center of a fierce battle. Therefore, it was impossible to ignore these enemies, because they dared to touch his younger sister Sua. At first, he thought that the enemies had captured the girl only to lure him in and carry out someone's secret mission. If it weren't for his faithful dog, it's unknown what would have happened to his sister, and whether he would have been able to save her. Now he will have to be always on guard and constantly think about how to act in such situations. At this time, in another place, a man was sitting in an office and discussing with his ward the news that Meng Shi Wu had been injured. The ward informed him that Meng Shi Wu had done all of this, although officially he was only a D-class hunter. A senior leader of Pandemonium named Ju-won was shocked to learn that one of the leaders was attacked by such a low-level hunter. The subordinate added that he himself was not sure of the veracity of this information, but was telling everything he had managed to find out. Ju-won became enraged by the unverified information and used his suppressive power to force the man to collapse to the ground. The man, under pressure, nevertheless reported that an inspection bureau was working at the scene of the incident. This news greatly surprised the leader, as he was shocked by the very fact of the intervention of intelligence officers. The man explained that the scene of the fight was immediately cordoned off by the Special Operations Bureau, and although there were survivors, for some reason they went crazy. The leader couldn't understand why exactly Meng Shi Wu did all this, but he heard that Meng Shi Wu had received a certain order before. The order specified Meng Shi Wu as the target, and it was during its execution that this whole strange incident occurred, after which the guy was never caught. As a result, one of the organization's leaders ended up being the victim of a D-class hunter, and no one knew whether it was an accident or not. Perhaps the inspection bureau itself was behind it,
because knowing Li Mingzhong's crazy character, it seemed quite possible. The few who escaped, although they had gone mad, even they trembled in terror when they heard Meng Shi Wu's name again. Judging by their reactions, it was indeed this guy who was the cause of everything, and the question remained as to why he was listed as a low-class hunter. Now, because of him, the whole company and the criminal world could face big problems. But this could be used to their advantage, so the leader said that this guy needed to be given a serious warning. The ward was ordered to convey to all members of Pandemonium the order to find Meng Shi Wu. Previously, he would have been simply killed on the spot, but now the Inspection Bureau intervened, and this made the situation extremely unpleasant. He asked how the Bureau's investigation was progressing to find out what else the intelligence services knew. The man reported that Baek Sung-jae, the chief expert inspector, was already ready for battle and was taking active action. At this time, Kim Ji-pil was furiously throwing papers around and shouting at Li Minjong, accusing her of madness and arbitrariness. He was outraged that despite being the squad leader, she had carried out a real massacre. The head of the Seoul office of the Inspection Bureau accused her of ignoring orders and killing dozens of people. The girl humbly apologized and explained that all those killed were dangerous repeat offenders and hardened criminals. The man shouted even louder, declaring that she dared to object, because if they were like that, they would not be able to resist so much. He reminded that their actions looked more like murder than self-defense, and this meant a serious violation. This time, the commander really crossed a dangerous line, and she was ordered to immediately hand over her uniform. Her partner stood behind her, trying to intercede, but the man replied that then the uniform would have to be taken from them too. Kim Ji-pil demanded that they at least remain silent out of respect for his position, since he is the boss and has the right to criticize. He then stated that he was waiting for the girl to finally hand in her form and admit her mistake. Her partner shouted that it was unfair because he was simply afraid of his connections with criminals being exposed. These words made the man lose his temper. He jumped up and shouted, demanding that what was said be repeated again. At this point, Li Minjong interrupted him, saying that she would hand over her uniform, but only if he left her team alone. The man coughed, pulled himself together, and agreed to her condition, promising to do just that. Suddenly, Baek Sung-jae entered the room and stated that, in his opinion, it was better to leave the commander alone. Everyone immediately turned to the door and could not understand why the director himself was there. The man said that he heard about their encounter with Pandemonium and did not understand how the director decided to come here. He also thought that the boss might not even know how dangerous this organization is. He had just heard accusations that Ji-pil was collaborating with criminals, but he immediately began to justify himself, calling it a misunderstanding. Baek Sung-jae calmly replied that it didn't matter whether it was a misunderstanding or not, because the investigation would still find out everything. At that moment, guards appeared behind him, confirming the seriousness of his words. The man approached Li Minjong and asked her to prepare a detailed analysis as the squad leader. He added that he would like to talk to her alone if she had at least a few minutes. After some time, when they were alone, he asked directly if she had really done all this. Li Minjong sat silently and thought about how the director himself was known for cutting off the air supply to many criminal organizations in Korea. The very fact of his existence was enough to instill fear in criminals, as he was the son of Baek Song-pyong, one of the 13 saviors of humanity. The man said he already knew about what happened and asked if the killings were really so necessary. He recalled that when the demon world invaded, the awakened became the hope of humanity. But as stability became established, more and more people began to think only about money, although his father considered this normal. Father said that he had fought for many years for the common world and valued it more than anyone else, although he understood that some used force for evil. His father took this very hard, but said that they should not be like them, because otherwise they would be no different from Pandemonium. As his father claimed, justice is always obvious, but the man was sure that in reality, it is not always like that. He admitted that there was a line, but by working in the mud, they inevitably got dirty too, and so the killings could be forced. Li Minjong listened to him carefully and agreed, saying that, overall, what he said was correct. Baek Sung-jae clarified that he still wanted to know whether they really were the ones who dealt with the criminals. The girl answered negatively and explained that she had checked all the surveillance cameras in the area, but was unable to find out who did it. She also added that all the survivors had lost their minds and were unable to speak clearly. These people were terrified,
but some of them repeated only one name associated with the hunter. The man asked if they were talking about an S-class hunter, to which the girl replied in the negative. She explained that his power level was completely different, as he was a D-class hunter. At this time, Shi Wu was feeding his little puppy fresh meat and asked him with interest if it was tasty. At that moment, his sister came into his room and was surprised that the guy got out of bed so unusually early that day. Shi Wu was sure that So-ah had become suspicious when she woke up, but at least he had managed to fix the doorknob in time. Divine metallurgy can be used for repairs, as there are no restrictions here, but one must still always be prepared for the unexpected. And then the thought occurred to him that perhaps he should build a completely new house. If you build a new house using divine metallurgy, it will be protected from any attacks, and your sister will be safe. The only question was where exactly to build it, since Soa still needed treatment, so they couldn't leave Seoul. However, he had more than 10 billion won, and he could afford to buy the house they were currently in. Shi Wu turned to his sister and calmly said that he would only go out for a short while. But as soon as he opened the door and went outside, a man appeared in front of him who wanted to ask the guy a question. Baek Sung-jae, wearing a beautiful, expensive suit, asked him if he was by any chance that same Meng Shi Wu. Shi Wu was in a state of great shock, not realizing who the man in front of him was, even though he vaguely remembered seeing the man on the news. After thinking for a while, he came to the conclusion that it was most likely Baek Sung-jae. But what is the director of the bureau doing here? Did he really come because of the events that happened yesterday? The bureau obviously couldn't ignore what had happened, and Shi Wu should have known this would happen since they had reached So-a, causing him to lose control of himself. However, he did not understand why Song-jae had come in person and so quickly. Although this was still only his assumption, since nothing was known for sure and there was no point in rushing to conclusions. The guy admitted that yes, he really was Meng Shi Wu, and he was immediately asked directly if it was really he who had caused trouble in the criminal world yesterday. Having done this to people, he now lives peacefully, as if nothing happened. Shi Wu was horrified that the man already knew everything, because he was much stronger than Meng Jigwan, and the guy could not defeat him. The only thought on his mind was that he had to run away, but his sister was here, and he didn't know what would happen to her if he ran away. However, even despite the enemy's strength, he could not simply retreat, and the man unexpectedly came closer, placing his hand on his shoulder. Shi Wu was very afraid and didn't know what to do, and the man suddenly asked him if he wanted to become a guard. After some time, the guy was sitting alone at the bus stop and thinking about this offer, trying to figure out what the salary would be, since he already had employees, but they said that with long service, the annual income could reach 1 billion won. He found it hard to believe such words, although, if he thought about it, he certainly wouldn't refuse such a salary. But why did this man suddenly make him such an offer and then leave without waiting for an answer? Didn't he initially expect consent? Then why did he come at all? If he had come because of yesterday's events and for the sake of investigation, then it all looked very strange. But Shi Wu understood that it was not his job to solve such matters. Now he was sitting in a strange apartment, at a table next to a woman, and said that he would like to talk about the house in which they now lived. He asked the woman if she wanted to sell the house, and she was very surprised why he was asking about it. She told him not to worry, because as long as he lived there, she was not going to sell the house, and housing prices were now so low that it was not profitable. Interest rates had risen, real estate agent commissions were high, and she added that she wouldn't sell the house until she had children, so he had nothing to worry about. Shi Wu said he wasn't insisting, but if she ever thought about selling it, he'd like to buy it back. The woman knew that he was one of the awakened ones, which meant that he was doing well in business and had money, so he could afford to buy her house. The woman was genuinely happy and said it was wonderful, but admitted that she wasn't sure, because he himself understood that the house was very old and it was not easy to live in. Shi Wu looked away and admitted that he was too attached to this house, and the woman replied that if he really wanted it, she would give it to him for 150 million. The guy was shocked because the price seemed too low, but the woman explained that she simply knew how hard it was for him, and if she had put the house up for sale, she would hardly have received more. She told him to just accept the house as her gift, but Shi Wu replied that if it weren't for her, he and his sister would probably have died on the streets, so he would buy it for 1 billion. The woman was completely shocked when she heard that he was offering such an incredibly high price. And now, sometime later, Shi Wu was riding on a tram and thinking that building a house turned out to be much more difficult than he had imagined. There was too much paperwork, registration, building permits, and other documents, and it would take several months to obtain them. Now he couldn't even upload videos to YouTube, and in the comments, viewers were already asking why there were no new updates. The guy still had to prepare for a fencing lesson with Charon. A table appeared on the screen, indicating that Zhang Sambong's channel subscription cost 2 billion won per month and had already been purchased. If you subtract the money for the deposit, he was left with 6.5 billion, even though the channel subscription alone cost 3.1 billion per month. Another table with a new subscription immediately popped up, and the guy became sad, realizing how quickly the money was disappearing. And just a couple of hours later, he found himself at the SH headquarters and met with Charon in the living room. The guy noticed that the girl looked better every day, and she suddenly asked how much her training would cost. Shi Wu explained that they would have 2 lessons a week, and the training itself would be quite expensive. The cost was 10 billion a month, and he asked if that price was okay with her, to which the girl replied that it was perfectly okay with her. Shi Wu was shocked that she agreed so quickly, because for the SH group, 10 billion seemed like mere peanuts. He even thought that perhaps he should have overcome his conscience and asked for more. But the girl said that she had expected about that amount. Grandfather wouldn't have allowed her to spend more anyway, since it wasn't a one-time purchase, but a regular monthly payment. Shi Wu confirmed that they had agreed on such a price, but 120 billion a year was a huge sum even for SH. After this, he turned to the girl and said that he would like to ask something. He explained that he was planning to build a new house, but it turned out to be much more difficult administratively than he thought, and Charon was surprised that he was planning to build it himself. She replied that she would find out everything he needed. Shi Wu thanked her, but he wondered to himself if she had understood everything too quickly. A table with the creation of a single-use weapon appeared on the screen, and he was shocked that it could only be used once, because the material turned out to be a nightmare. The blacksmith standing nearby was amazed that he had only been training all this time. Charon took over all the paperwork related to the house, and thanks to this, Shi Wu had more free time. At that moment, Soyeon came to the men and said that she was just passing by, remembered the blacksmith, and decided to stop by. She greeted Shi Wu, since she hadn't seen him for a long time, and asked what was new with him. Shi Wu became embarrassed, blushed, and, looking away, replied that there were a lot of things, although the girl asked him to tell her more. The guy remembered all the events, how he fought with a huge wolf, with bandits and their leader, but said out loud that there was nothing interesting. Soyeon noted that if he still needed her help, he could always turn to her. Shi Wu was very happy to hear this, approached her and asked if he could ask for something right now. He didn't mean anything by it, he just wanted to know if she could help him with building materials. Soyeon said that it was easy to get them, but asked why he suddenly needed them. And when she heard that they were needed to build a house, at first she didn't believe his words. Was he really going to build the house himself? Even though she knew he had a well-developed skill in creating it. After all, the ability to create weapons and the ability to build a house are completely different things. But Shi Wu interrupted her and handed her a piece of paper, saying that it contained a list of the necessary materials. Soyeon looked closely at the list and noted that these were not construction materials at all. But suddenly her eyes lit up, and she realized with surprise that this entire list was completely special. Does the guy really want to build a house from the remains of monsters? And Shi Wu confirmed that this is exactly the kind of house he is going to build. Baek Sung-jae was sitting on a bench in the park when a man approached him and asked what had happened. Taemin Park said that Oh Ju-won did nothing and seemed to be trying to cover up what happened, meaning he probably realized who was behind it. Baek Sung-jae, sipping his drink, calmly remarked that everything had become clear to him and that he considered it a great shame. He asked the man why he was looking at him with such a strange look, because people are predictable, or whether it was because he was sitting alone and drinking. Taemin Park asked the director why he hadn't punished Shi Wu in any way, and heard that there was Lee Min-jun, the commander of the 4th Squad of Guards. She said that it was not like that at all, because there was much more humanity in him than in the others, and asked Chief Pak how long he had been working in the bureau. The man replied that he was almost 7 years old, and Baek Sung-jae said that he was also an old man, since he had awakened at the age of 11 and trained with his father for 8 years. And then his father told him to go and see the world, so he wandered for 5 years, and then joined the bureau and worked there for 20 years. He caught many criminals. Many tried to kill him, but died themselves. Otherwise, there could have been many more victims. Perhaps that was why he was tired of being human, because people are sometimes much worse than monsters. But the man emphasized that the guy was not a criminal. In fact, he does not trust people, and when communicating with them, he always remains on guard and very vigilant. And frankly speaking, in his eyes, everyone looks like a potential criminal, although there are still people who continue to believe in him. He asked Min Pak if he knew who these people were, and was told that he wasn't sure, but that they might be people who needed to feed their families. It's really not easy because you have to make sacrifices, and that's why parents are always admirable. But Shi Wu has a goal. He has to save his own sister, And Min Park said that it was suspicious because at his level, he is engaged in such dangerous activities. He had almost single-handedly destroyed an entire criminal underworld. But the man replied that perhaps this judgment was too unfair. Min Park couldn't understand what he meant, so the man explained that people were called butchers, although this was not true at all. They must remember one thing. The blade of their sword must be directed only against criminals, because he likes a peaceful society. This was the kind of world his father defended. After which, the man headed towards the SH group. Min Park was extremely surprised when he heard these words. Baek Sungjae turned around and reminded them that their swords were to be aimed solely at criminals. At this time, Shi Wu was telling Soyun that he was going to build a house on his own. The blacksmith stood nearby and was shocked, asking if he was confident in himself, because the guy had never done this before, but he believed that he could handle it. He asked the girl if it would be difficult to get the materials, and she replied that perhaps they could be found, although the price would be high. The list included dragon scales, golem ore, and death knight armor. These are not simple monsters at all, and all the materials can only be obtained from B and A+ rank creatures. These materials are in constant need of hunters, and it is almost impossible to obtain them in sufficient quantities because hunters do not sell them. But this doesn't mean that Soyun won't be able to get them. The price will just be significantly higher than usual, at least 3 times the market value, so Shi Wu should expect to be worth 3 billion won. The guy was very surprised, although he realized that this was not a problem, because Charon had already paid for his education. It would be possible to reduce the level of materials, but the house must be absolutely safe for his sister, so there is no room for savings. He asked Soyun if she was sure she could get them, and she said she would try her best. The only problem is that hunters generally don't sell such valuable materials. This means that they will have to be mined using their own resources. But the monsters you have to hunt start at B class, and Shi Wu's level is still D class. All that remains is to obtain a hunting permit, but in his situation, this is absolutely impossible. The guy looked at his hand and wondered if he should try to increase his rank, since there were 2 paths to development. The first way is to improve your skills and gain recognition. The second way is to retake an exam that was previously unavailable, but after waking up, the situation has changed. Now a second method has emerged, and the examination has become something like a confirmation of awakening. Awakened are divided into 2 types: those who gain new special abilities, and those who have existing ones enhanced. The reason for the awakening is still unknown, but if it happened early, the level can be improved by retaking the exam. However, Shi Wu's abilities are not at their best right now. He has insight, skill, superpower, divine significance, divine metallurgy, and the strength of Hercules, and he decided not to waste time. After that, Shi Wu left the forge, saying goodbye to everyone and saying that he needed to go out. At the same time, Charon was visiting her aunt, who was very surprised by her arrival. The woman was Han Mina, the director of SH Group, and she noticed that the girl seemed to be having a hard time. Han Mina told her niece that the company had found stability thanks to her, but Charon replied that she was just doing her job and that the credit went to the director. Auntie said that Charon was still the same because she was a future director, and asked how long her niece would be wasting her time on nonsense. Sharon replied that she came to her today not as an aunt, but as the director of the company. The woman was very surprised to hear this, and remembered what a sweet child her niece had been. Her brother also left her for a chaebol family, and their shared blood made them rivals. So, after her parents' death, she was crushed from all sides. In such difficult conditions, it was impossible not to change, and the woman herself would not have survived if not for her father and brother. Although she couldn't help Charon before when she was little, the situation has changed now. Charon got down to business and said she wanted to build a house, asking if she could use SH's influence. Han Mina asked if she really wanted to build a villa, but she replied that it was just an ordinary house. Aunt said that she might not like the house where she now lives, and in that case, she would not stay away. She added that she would contact President Park from the construction department, and if contractors were not involved, the house would be built quickly. Charon stopped her relative and said that it was not for her, but she needed official permission from the company. Han Mina was calmly sipping her coffee, but when she heard this, she was very surprised. Meanwhile, Shi Wu was in the waiting room before taking the second exam at the Seoul Hunter Management Bureau, and someone came out of the room, sad about failing. Shi Wu sat confidently, because out of the 100 people taking the test, no one believed in low scores. He was once the same, because after awakening from the magical explosion of the dungeon, he gained a level. Back then, he hoped that he would awaken to S or A rank abilities and eagerly awaited the results. But everything turned out differently. He had no abilities at all, and his level turned out to be below F class.
That is, even below the lowest level. Now the situation was completely different. Suddenly, someone came up and told him to come into the office. A repeat study was conducted using a special scanner that recorded the person's awakening. He was asked to stand on the marks in front of the device, and the start of the measurement was announced. Shi Wu was told not to move, and he thought about how he had gained a lot of skills since then. He was sure that soon the entire bureau and even the entire world would change, and it was in vain that he had hesitated for so long to reconsider. But after fighting Pandemonium, he gained confidence and understood that he had to protect himself because he had power, and he would not submit to anyone. Now he had no reason to hide, and the people watching the results were shocked. Shi Wu was already looking forward to the world's first recorded SS rank awakening, or maybe even the first awakened SSS level. Shi Wu looked at the screen in surprise, where it was written that he had no awakened ability and his level was below F class. All the people standing nearby could not believe their eyes, and did not understand how such a strange conclusion was even possible. Shi Wu shouted, demanding that they wait, since, in his opinion, there had been a mistake. But he was told that the retest was completed and that he needed to leave. Shi Wu loudly asked to check his results one more time, hoping for a change, but no one was going to meet him halfway. Here he is sitting on the bench and completely doesn't understand why, after everything that happened, the results still haven't changed. But this is simply impossible. Could the testing apparatus not detect the hidden divine power in him? The only rank higher than the existing one is S, and its results turned out to be even lower than F. Although it would have been logical to give impossible to determine. Hercules said he was a nobody, but due to his lack of personal abilities, the test results most likely remained unchanged. Although he is not entirely sure of this, there is definitely meaning in Hercules' words. Or maybe all this happened because the level of mastery of powers has not yet reached 100%. Because he is still just learning. He himself does not know the reason, because how can he know whether it is even possible to study the abilities of the gods and use them as his own? Hercules said that he was unique precisely because of his lack of abilities. Therefore, only he could know the power of the gods. But who then was that mysterious blonde man he met deep in the cave? Perhaps this man knew something about Shi Wu, and that was why he came to him that day. After all, the blonde said back then that he had foreseen this outcome, and regretted dragging Shi Wu into it. The guy remembered his words, and now realized that it seemed the blonde knew everything in advance. In any case, the retest turned out to be completely useless, and now I'll have to increase my rank only through dungeon raids. Right now his grade is D, and to reach at least an A level, he will need to put in much more effort. Moreover, he hadn't uploaded new videos to his YouTube channel for a long time, which was also important to him. He even recalled one amazing video that is perfect for the current situation. At this time, Baek Sung-jae suddenly came to the man, who was surprised that the inspection director had come in person. Baek Sung-jae explained that the visit was sudden, but despite this, he was greeted very hospitably. Han Kwang-guk, director of the SH Group of Companies, replied that since the inspection director himself had come, it was worth sitting down and talking. He asked the reason for the visit, and he said that he had always wanted to meet and that their company was the backbone of the country's economy. Kwang-guk noted that as Inspector General, he is responsible for the safety of all of Korea, and managing a business means directing efforts. Baek Sung-jae responded by noting that it's important not only to have business acumen, but also to be able to please investors and market yourself effectively. He also added that family shouldn't be forgotten, as sometimes even loved ones can stab you in the back. Although he holds the position of director of the inspection, he does not intend to interfere in their family conflicts, and it does not concern him. He said directly that he suspected that Director Kwang-guk was well acquainted with Charon's name, and the man was surprised by such knowledge. The interlocutor explained that there were known attempts to oust Han Chae-rin from the company, since Shi Wu helped her in the dungeon. Did they even conduct their own investigation with the help of Pandemonium to find out all this? If the criminals contact him again, Baek Sung-jae will not limit himself to warnings, because his words always carry weight. He is the son of one of the 13 heroes who saved humanity, and his influential company is capable of exerting pressure even on politicians. So Kwang-guk was made clear that this man is someone who must not be touched under any circumstances. But Kwang-guk couldn't understand why the inspector was so diligent in protecting a simple guy named Shi Wu. The man simply replied that since the name was familiar, he wouldn't even ask where it was from, and asked them to stop squabbling. He ordered them to stop both family feuds and other conflicts, said that that was enough for today, and calmly left. At this time, Park Doku apologized to her boss, saying that she had no money this month and asked him not to fire her.
Shi Wu was very surprised and didn't understand what exactly she meant by her words. The girl explained that her salary was only paid when her subscriber count increased, but her boss didn't understand her surprise. She even asked if he was planning to close the channel, and Shi Wu was shocked by the thought. He immediately thought that he had been uploading videos too infrequently, and this is what it all led to. The guy asked if she really hadn't received her salary, and the girl replied that the conditions were good and the boss was kind, but she just hadn't worked. Shi Wu recalled that he had promised her a basic salary from the very beginning, and that he had actually met with her specifically to discuss content. Park Doku was very embarrassed, and he responded by asking her to continue working with him. Besides, today is payday, and he has already sent her money so that she can buy something for the younger ones. He remembered how he himself, as a child, rejoiced when his father brought him a tasty chicken. And for her younger children, she is, after all, a parent. The girl lowered her head and quietly said that it was okay to call her simply by her first name, without formalities. Then she felt embarrassed because she understood that the guy might feel awkward addressing her like that, since he was older and her boss. Shi Wu laughed and said that he agreed, but she could call him Oppa in return. Park Doku blushed and promised that she would try to get used to addressing him that way. After that, the guy reminded her about new content, but she didn't understand what he meant. Earlier, he visited the Seoul branch of the Hunter Management Bureau to clarify some questions that interested him. Approaching the counter, he met a woman who immediately recognized him and remembered that he was awakened. She said that his name seemed to be Meng Shi Wu and that he came a few days ago. The girl happily asked him why he had come again, and he replied that he wanted to check the evaluation standards. She asked if he had a hunting license, and the guy showed the document, saying that his current level was D. The girl was in complete shock, because an awakened person with such a low rating is an extremely rare case. Perhaps this is his limit, since he has no personal ability, and all that remains is to adhere to general criteria. She told him that to level up, he needed to complete 200 raids in D-level dungeons and then submit a request. Since he usually raids 3 times a week, it will take him a little over a year to reach rank C. Once he completes 200 dungeons, he will be able to request a rank review and gain access to a new test. She asked if he had any questions, but Shi Wu said that everything was clear to him and asked how many raids he had completed. The girl reported that he had completed 16 raids so far, meaning there were still 184 left. She suggested that if he planned to go today, they should make room for him and asked about his preferences. Shi Wu said that it didn't matter to him, but it would be more convenient to choose the nearest dungeon. Then the girl told him that there was a D+ level dungeon 5 minutes away, but she was worried about whether he could handle it. Shi Wu agreed, and she explained how to get there, wishing him a successful hunt. After a while, she called the next client and was very surprised to see Meng Shi Wu standing in front of her again. She decided that the D+ dungeon was too difficult, which is why he returned so quickly. The guy said that it was inconvenient for him to go back and forth every time, and he asked to combine all the raids into one. Park Doku sat next to him and, while discussing the content, asked him what he meant by that. Shi Wu explained that his new project was to reach A level in 1 month. Park Doku, hearing this, was completely shocked and could not believe his words. And the guy suggested calling the project How to Become a Class A Hunter. He had previously asked the girl if it was possible to combine all the raids into one, or at least 50. At the branch of the Hunting Inspection Bureau, a man complained and shouted at the boss. He asked why he was shouting so loudly, whether a new rift had appeared in the dungeon, but the guy explained that there was a hunter who was conducting a mass raid and going through dungeons one after another. The boss was surprised and asked how far he had already walked, 10 or 20, but he was told that the number had reached 150. He couldn't believe such nonsense and recalled that the retest showed that it was just an ordinary awakened one. But he was told that the results had been verified and it was worth reporting it to the main bureau. The boss suggested that the guy might be an illegal, but he was interrupted and told that he had already requested a promotion to rank C. The man was in complete shock because he knew that to get to level C, you need to go through 200 dungeons, and just now there were 150 of them. He said that it would be enough to write a message to the main inspection bureau, but they objected that it would be better to call directly. At this time, Lee Min-jung was reviewing documents at the Seoul branch of the Hunters Bureau, and her partner reported the order received from management. They were told that one hunter had leveled up from D rank to C rank in just 3 days, and an investigation was needed. When the girl learned the name of this hunter, she heard that it was Meng Shi Wu and was truly shocked. He tried to officially record his rank, but wouldn't it be easier to take a retest? although since the level had increased due to achievements, a retest was impossible. Therefore, there is a possibility that he became stronger by using illegal methods like black magic. The commander turned to Aren, who served in the Hunting Bureau's Response Team 4, and asked if she had encountered Awakened using black magic. The girl replied that she had encountered it, and began to explain the differences from ordinary magic where it is used. But when asked to explain in more detail, she said that black magic is based on negative emotions. Feelings such as joy, anger, anxiety, fear, love, hate, and greed fuel black magic. And the stronger the passion, the greater the power. However, this causes the soul to burn faster, and the end of those who seek power through such magic is predetermined. These people lose their human form and turn into monsters who only want to kill. Li Minzhong asked how to recognize them, and was told that they were easy to spot right away. You don't even need to use magic for this, because they look ominous, as the commander suggested. Li Minzhong knew that the director had recently met with Meng Shi Wu, and even offered to take care of him. She wondered if the director really wanted to make him a guard. The girl turned to her partner and told her to tell her superiors that they could handle it, and there was no need to worry. After that, she went back to her paperwork, thinking about this guy. Shi Wu was making something with his own hands at this time, and saw a message that what he had created was junk. But his divine metallurgy skill had increased slightly. He realized it wasn't a weapon at all, perhaps because he was creating inferior tools, but he decided to get used to the process. Initially, it turned out even worse, but the result was still rubbish. However, it was time to level up the hunter, as Park So-yeon hadn't gotten the building materials yet, and he needed to get stronger and build a house. Shi Wu was unsure whether he could handle it, and suddenly heard someone coming, so he turned around. So-yeon walked in, said hello, and saw that the guy was there, as expected. He asked her about the materials he had requested, and she replied that it was very difficult to find the required quantity, but she even got her younger brother involved. Shi Wu was surprised to learn that she had a younger brother, and she was amazed that she hadn't told him about it before. She explained that his name was Kim Lee-jun. He was 20 years old, he was awakened and worked as a hunter, so she asked him to help with the materials. These materials were rare parts of A-class monsters, and while they were unavailable to Shi Wu, he clarified his brother's level. She replied that her brother had reached level A+, which surprised Shi Wu greatly, as it was great. So-yeon said that it had been a while since he had awakened. He was still inexperienced, and she was always worried about him. But his ability was super regeneration, or as one might say, a super rebirth, since the power accelerates the body's recovery. According to her, it is similar to the regeneration of trolls, who can even restore lost limbs. She assured him that there was no need to worry and that his brother would definitely get some of the ingredients. Suddenly, their conversation was interrupted by the blacksmith, whom So-yeon greeted and said that she had come from a metallurgist seminar and asked about equipment. The blacksmith replied that the work was in progress and she could take a look herself, while Shi Wu thought that he needed to look for the materials to level up himself. He said goodbye to them and left the forge. Park Doku sat at the table editing the video, soon happily announcing that the work was finished. This time the task proved challenging, as there were 184 videos in total, with a total duration of over 22 hours. For other hunters, it takes over a year to go from level D to level C. But for this guy, it only took 3 days, which was amazing. Soon, she received a new message from Shi Wu, who sent 300 more videos for editing. Park Doku looked through some of them and was amazed that he had already moved from level C to level B. This meant that she would have to re-edit everything again. Soon, another message arrived from the boss with a transfer of 10 million won. He wrote that it was a bonus for editing, and if the views were high, she would receive an additional bonus. Park Doku looked at her younger brother and sister and decided that it was worth trying for them. The video about quickly leveling up from rank 4 to rank A garnered nearly 1 million views, subscribers grew, and comments poured in. Shi Wu realized that his assistant was an excellent editor because he hadn't expected so many views in one day. But it wasn't easy to film the video himself. He'd already broken a lot of cameras and couldn't ask the girl to film it, since she was just an ordinary person. He decided that he could hire an awakened one to do the filming. Shi Wu noticed that So-yeon was unsuccessfully calling someone on the phone. He asked what was the matter, and the girl said that she could not contact Lee Jong. He entered the Dragon Turtle dungeon yesterday and hasn't responded since. Shi Wu asked if she had called the department, and the girl replied that yes, they had recorded his entry, but they didn't know if everything was okay with him. And the guy said that most likely everything was fine, because it was impossible to guess the time of the hunt. Perhaps he simply decided to have a drink with the squad to celebrate completing the dungeon, something that often happens at 20 years old. So-yeon objected that her brother wasn't like that, But Shi Wu reminded him of his super regeneration and said that no news was also good news. Just in case, he decided to report this to the inspectorate. The girl thanked him and said that she had to go. She walked along the path, continuing to call her brother. Shi Wu understood her anxiety, but now all she could do was wait. At this time, in a dark basement, a man was sitting on a chair, chained. When he woke up, he realized his situation and tried to break free, but did not understand what was happening. He remembered that he had previously hunted the dragon turtle with his squad to help his sister. After the hunt, they decided to have a drink. They had a good time, drank, and nothing foreshadowed trouble. However, he was soon kidnapped, and the boy experienced horror. Suddenly, a man appeared in front of him and told him not to move, because he had created the chains in such a way that even an S-class hunter would not be able to break them. Li Zhang asked him what he was going to do, and the man called him curious, asking if it was really important for him to know. The man leaned close to his face and asked if he had ever heard of illegal awakenings. He acted crazy, clutched his head, and declared that everything happened thanks to him. He was not recognized, his efforts were not appreciated, although he only wanted to make people stronger, because the loss of blood or limbs leads to death. Do Yup Chul grabbed Li Jun's face and said that he was different. This means that the results of his research will definitely be different. In the training hall, Charon was training with Shi Wu and practicing attacks on him. The guy said that Tai Chi is a skill based on the interaction of yin and yang, which are as different as earth and sky. Although these entities are opposites, in reality, they are closely connected and completely dependent on each other. At first, Shi Wu tried to create a new fencing style and teach it to his friend, but he realized that he himself first needed to understand what he could do, since he barely understood what he was explaining. Now his goal has become to create a new fencing based on Tai Chi, because it is a skill that turns even an ordinary strike into an art, and Charon has the ability of a sword master. This will help the girl develop her own sword technique, although it can hardly be called Tai Chi sword. No one can be considered a true master of fencing, but he believed that he could develop this style at least to the level of ease. The guy told his friend to feel the interaction of yin and yang and transfer this feeling to herself and the sword, after which he knocked the weapon out of her hands. He noted that only with this knowledge could the girl easily repel enemy attacks, and Charon replied that it was very difficult, but he reassured her. In fact, without the skill of insight, he himself understood little. But he assured her that with careful listening, everything would work out. He added that he would repeat the explanations over and over again until she remembered them, so she shouldn't worry. Then the guy said that they were done for today and were going to leave, but the girl noted that she would resolve the issue within a month. Shi Wu was surprised and didn't understand what she was talking about, but she explained that she was talking about his request. The guy guessed that she meant the building permit, and delighted, thanked her. Charon started wiping her face after the workout and said that there was nothing to thank her for yet, and he was surprised that even Korean laws were not in order for her. She added that construction materials will also be ready by the end of the month. The commander's assistant reported that a report had been received about Kim Li Jun being missing. She handed the girl a paper and told her to read it first, because it contained information about those who had been on the same raid with him. Li Minzhang looked into it carefully and realized that it was related to the illegal awakened ones. She said that more precisely, they were hunters who were suspected of assisting illegal awakenings, and only Kim Li Jung was an exception among them. The commander asked if they had lured him in on purpose, and that his special ability was apparently the reason for it all. After all, his main skill is super regeneration, and they say that even if you cut off his limb, it will still recover. Most likely, Kim Li Jun was kidnapped for cruel experiments on people. Shi Wu sat outdoors and tried to call Hercules. He wanted to talk to him about creating video content, but he was so busy that he didn't have time to get in touch. The guy was worried because he even ignored several important calls and hoped that Hercules would not be offended. Then he decided that when he called, they would first discuss the content, and he put the phone in his pocket. Before the guy could do anything, huge red stone monsters made of lava appeared in front of him. They were S-level volcanic golems, with molten lava flowing from their bodies and emitting terrifying screams. Shi Wu took a deep breath and applied Zhang Sanfeng's Tai Chi, which was completely different from Hercules' super strength. In martial arts, there are three main elements: the heart or soul, the energy of the estuary, and the body, that is, physical strength. The wisdom of Confucius's mind corresponds to the heart. Hercules' extraordinary strength is matched by his body. Energy is embodied in Zhang Sanfen's Tai Chi. The boy concentrated. Magic began to shine in his hands, and he extended his hand forward. After that, he fired a huge beam straight at the golems and destroyed them. The awakened used the power of mana, which is drawn from nature itself and is present in every living being. To use it,
A process of sensation is necessary, and the effectiveness of its use depends on how exactly this process occurs. Without undergoing purification, mana does not accumulate, and therefore, Shi Wu uses the power of Tai Chi. A huge blue beam burst from his fist and flew very far. Suddenly, everything around began to collapse and thunder loudly, and Shi Wu covered his face. When he opened his eyes, he saw several golden balls on the floor in front of him. He was extremely surprised that there were so many of them, and he realized that his knowledge of strength and the heart of a gentleman, humanity, righteousness, and wisdom had increased greatly. Hercules had told him earlier that this would help, and he was indeed right. However, the recoil was also very strong, and if he wanted to combine it with supernatural power, then in his current state, it was impossible. But Tai Chi was never considered a force that could not be used, and in this, it was very lucky. The boy never thought that Hua Tuo's healing skills would be useful to him, and according to legend, possessing divine powers gives the opportunity to be reborn as a god. This can be called a body metamorphosis that many dream of. Although he can only partially use this power for now, he already knows how to regulate Tai Chi for good. He subscribed to the channel only to cure his sister, but this resource turned out to be much more useful than he expected, and he felt much better. His skill has increased by 30%, and now Soa can study in college, and perhaps she can be completely cured. Then the guy turned back, remembering something important. He realized that his camera was broken and no longer working, and now he needed to find someone who would shoot videos for him. When night fell, he summed up. He had completed 15 raids into a level A dungeon today, and he needed to complete 500 to reach his goal. At this rate, it would take longer than he thought, as B-level dungeons required monotonous passage, and it was difficult to speed up. But by the end of the month, Shi Wu will still manage because he is progressing quite quickly thanks to Fenrir's help. He even bought some beef to thank him, but the sum of 700,000 won seemed excessive. After all, his daily food alone costs him 2 million, which amounts to 60 million per month, and that's not counting the fee for membership in God Tuba. The cost of getting a puppy turned out to be too high, although it was not at all necessary. Shi Wu walked into the apartment and was immediately greeted by his sister and her puppy. Soa told her brother that he had a guest, and he was surprised to have arrived so late. He walked down the corridor and carefully peered around the corner to see the guest. Li Minzhong was sitting at the table, calmly waiting for his arrival. Suddenly, she turned her head and noticed a small puppy greedily eating an incredible amount of meat. Li Minzhong was greatly surprised and opened her eyes even wider. Shi Wu found it funny because he thought she had no emotions, but her face looked unusual. The guy interrupted her thoughts and asked why she came. Li Minzhong first apologized for her late arrival. She then said that the matter was serious and she had news about Kim Lee-jun. Soa, not understanding anything, looked at her brother in surprise. Shi Wu stood up from the table and realized that the news was unlikely to be good. Then he asked the girl to go out and talk to him alone. They went outside together, and Shi Wu was completely shocked when he heard that Li Zhong had been kidnapped for cruel experiments. Li Minzong explained that she thought this option was more likely, and Shi Wu remembered that he had previously been an awakened being without a special ability. He tried to awaken the abilities, and each experiment ended in pain and shame, because all home experiments of this kind are always dangerous. If this was a criminal experiment on humans, even with super hydration, he could go crazy. So it is important to find Li Zhong as soon as possible. However, Shi Wu didn't understand something and asked the girl why she had come to him to tell him all this. Li Minzhong replied that everything was connected to pandemonium and its influence on the events taking place. Criminals are using a so-called mind suppression device that can erase even traces captured by surveillance cameras. It was also used against pandemonium, which is capable of deceiving even the highest class of hunter, so the Inspection Bureau did not know where this organization was hiding. Not long ago, pandemonium and the entire criminal underworld in Seoul were completely destroyed thanks to one unexpected incident, and it all happened suddenly, and no one could determine who exactly caused such chaos and destruction. In missing persons cases, there is what is called a golden hour. And if a kidnapping has occurred, the chances of finding the person alive are almost non-existent once it is over. But the families of the missing do not know about this and continue to wait until the end, hoping that the person will definitely return. Li Minzong was the squad leader and felt both shame and pride for her actions in this situation. Although Li Zhong didn't owe her anything, her feelings were due to her insight and ability to sense the emotions of others. Shi Wu understood that the girl was ashamed and had to swallow her pride, so he felt sincere pity for her. Moreover, Li Minzhong simply asked for help in a human way, which made her request even more convincing. Shi Wu said that Soa was at home, and asked the girl to stay with her until he returned so that she would be safe.
He then turned to his puppy and asked him for a favor, so that he could find a person by scent.
According to the information provided, it all started in the Dragon Turtle Dungeon, where Li Zhong's last raid took place 3 days ago. After that, the guy went to check the bar where the squad members were, since this was the last place where Li Zhong was seen alive. Although even if some trace remained, it would be almost invisible. And the reason why he came here is completely different than it seemed at first.
Fenrir's sense of smell is so sensitive that he can detect the slightest scent. Just like back then in the hospital, the guy wasn't sure if he was sensing a scent or a magical trace, but he knew it would be easier to follow him here than in the bar, since more energy was manifested in the dungeon. The puppy was diligently sniffing everything around, suddenly stopped and turned to his owner, making a funny sound. Shi Wu realized that they were moving in the right direction and told them to go forward without deviating from the path they had found. At this time, rivers of blood flowed in the basement, and a person's scream could be heard, causing horror and helplessness. Li Zhong sat on a chair and was bullied, while his limbs slowly regenerated, demonstrating his unique ability. Do Yup-chul shouted that he had the best option, continuing to mock him and test his limits of patience. Li Zhong sat with empty, glassy eyes, not understanding how much more pain he would have to endure and how all this torment would end. He could no longer contain himself and thought that if he could close his eyes and feel nothing, it would be a real salvation. The man shouted at him not to die, because if Li Zhong died, his older sister would take his place. Li Zhong instantly came to his senses upon hearing about his sister, who was his one and only, and asked that she not be touched. Du Yup-chul said that if Li Jun died, he would have no choice since their shared blood meant they would have similar abilities. But Li Jun denied this, saying that his sister did not have such an ability, which upset Du Yup-chul. Du Yup-chul said that you can't know for sure until you see it for yourself, and laughed, adding irony to the situation. Li Zhong was shaking, but held on, knowing that he couldn't let anyone get to his sister. At that moment, another deep cut went through his body, causing severe pain, but he endured it for his sister's sake. He didn't know how much time had passed, but he still remained in the same place, showing incredible willpower. He endured as best he could, despite the severe pain, because death was unacceptable for the sake of preserving his sister's life. The only thought that remained in his head was that he had to protect her at any cost. And then, when despair almost overwhelmed him, a loud sound was heard, and the wall collapsed, opening the way to salvation. From behind the broken wall, Shi Wu appeared, suddenly appearing behind Li Zhong. He turned to Li Zhong and said that his sister was very worried and waiting for his return. Li Zhong was shocked, as such damage and injuries should not have occurred to a person with super regeneration. Although his regeneration rate was higher than that of the trolls, the damage was clearly beyond acceptable limits, and this was alarming. In such a state, the body was almost impossible to recover, and Li Zhong might have already gone mad from the pain. However, he remained alive, sat on a chair, and repeated one word: sister, showing amazing fortitude. Shi Wu realized that time was not lost yet, and he might be able to save him by taking out the medicinal needles for treatment. He sticks needles into Li Zhong's body and asks him to endure a little longer for his sister's sake, showing concern and patience. At first, Li Zhong did not react at all and looked very weak, barely holding on to consciousness. Gradually, his pale skin became healthier and he opened his eyes, showing signs of improvement. The first thing he asked the stranger was about his sister's health, and Shi Wu was glad that the guy was already feeling better. Suddenly, Do Yup-chul appeared behind him, and upon seeing the stranger, demanded an explanation of who he was and how he got there. A man in a white coat, covered in blood, declared that it was his personal place, expressing both rage and despair. He clutched his head and screamed like a madman, repeating that this was his personal place, not wanting to listen to anyone. When he scratched his head, a huge amount of dandruff fell down, which disgusted Shi Wu. Shi Wu stepped back to avoid catching her, exercising caution and common sense. Suddenly, his eyes widened in horror. He saw many body parts around him except Li Zhong, which was shocking. He couldn't believe that one person had done all this, and he tried to comprehend the scale of what had happened. Shi Wu turned to him and asked why he was doing this, trying to understand the criminal's motives. Do Yup-chul was furious, screaming and not understanding what Shi Wu was saying, losing control of himself. But suddenly he came to his senses, calmed down, and fell silent, as if he had realized what was happening. He asked Shi Wu if it was true that he was an unusual guy, showing interest in his abilities. After this, Do Yup-chul began to repeat the word unusual several times, showing surprise and recognition. Li Zhong came to his senses fully and told the stranger that he should run away quickly, fearing for his life. Du Yup-chul shouted that his opponent was unusual and admitted that both had amazing abilities that could not be underestimated. Du Yup-chul's body began to change shape dramatically. Tentacles and strange mutations appeared, frightening those present. He grew to a huge size and asked the stranger what his ability was and what experiment they were going to conduct on him.